call us to order. I just
Oh,
got
yeah.
the go ahead to do that. So we will call the CWCB meeting to order Thursday, September 17th, 2020. And we will begin the day with agenda item 15, Basin Director's Reports. And let's start at the North Platte Basin, Director Trick.
Thank you. Good morning, my fellow Zoom warriors. It's nice to see you. I do still want to reiterate, I'd rather be seeing you in person, but you know, it is what it is, and hopefully soon we can meet in person, but for now, it's nice to see you on computer. I think I have some slides here loaded, so I'll go ahead and tell Vivian to start those. If she has those up. Okay, you can go to slide 2 if you are able. Basically, the story here is the same as it is in most of the state right now. It's drought, 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 and fire, fire, fire. There's not much great news going on, and if you get to my second slide, am I in charge of this? Maybe I'm in charge of this. Okay. Hold on. Vivian, can you go slide number 2? Wait for just a second. I'm not seeing my slide up there, Vivian.
We're having a little technical difficulties.
Okay.
Hang on just
If I can't go with the slides, I'll just push on. I can also try to share it from my own screen if that works better.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, let's go ahead and try that. I stopped sharing, so you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, let me try that real quick. Sorry, guys, for the technical difficulty. Okay, can you see that?
we're good.
Okay. Okay, so is the whole slide up there right now that you can see? Okay. All right. So, like I said, not great news. Drought and fire is the main headlines here. This is the drought map from September 8th. And from what you can see there, as of that date, there was 54% area of the state in D3 drought. And that grew, you know, from 25% in June, as you can see from these numbers over here in the table. And here's a picture of what it looked like back in June. And we here in this basin are experiencing the same drought issues as most of the state at this point. So not great. Here's some gauge data from the Michigan River gauge at Walden. And as you can see here, the blue line is 2020, and this gray line is the historical average. So the historical average shows that we usually get this sort of gradual decrease in June and July. Well, this year it was quite sharp and quite shocking, actually. The gauge read 339 CFS on June 10th, and however, only 6 days later that had dropped to just 39 CFS, and that was quite surprising. And by August 24th, we almost had a complete dry up of the river. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was a complete dry up, and there was almost not enough water to go into the town of Walden's municipal infiltration intake. So there's been a call on the river for most of the summer. The river has pretty much almost dried up at points, and it's pretty strange year, pretty dire. We did get a little bit of moisture around Memorial Day weekend, which helped the river systems a little bit, but we're dry, high temperatures, not great for anybody, not great for the fish either. So that's one set of bad news. And moving on to another set of bad news is the 3 fires that are burning around us or close to us. And one fire, the Cameron Peak fire that everyone of course knows about, is in the North Platte Basin. As some may not recall, the Laramie River system is actually a part of this North Platte Basin. So the Cameron Peak fire, as you can see here, is actually going to affect that Laramie River Basin quite dramatically. And here's another fire, the Middle Fork fire, which started around September 7th. That was near Steamboat Springs, and it's sort of spreading in a westerly direction towards the Continental Divide at this point. And then the Williams Fork fire, also down in Grand County, which was ignited around August 14th. So lots of fires. Here's a picture of the Cameron Peak fire when it started. This is from basically the town of Walden area where the picture vantage point is taken from. And here's another photo that I took around August 15th. So the Cameron Peak fire, everybody, is already aware of it. As you know, you guys on the Front Range down there have had orange skies and ash falling down and crazy apocalyptic scenes. So this was the major factor in causing that. This fire, as of today, was 102,000 acres and 8% contained. And here was also another picture that I took from August 15th, where you can see the Cameron Peak fire over here and the Williams Fork fire down here in Grand County, all in one picture here. And here's an interesting little map that I found. I hope this works, but this shows a progression of the Cameron Peak fire from when it ignited on August 13th to where you can see how the fire significantly spread in just one day. And so there's a timeline here on the bottom where you can tell the progression through August, and then starting in September on the 6th, it jumped that far in a matter of a day, in a matter of hours. So I just wanted to show this map because I thought it was pretty telling, pretty interesting to how much a fire can jump just in one day due to winds and factors like that, where it can just double in size in a matter of hours. And I got a lot of this data from the National Interagency Fire Center ArcGIS maps, and it's what they call a story map. So if you're looking for fire data or track fires, it's a pretty good source of information there. Let's go back to my slides here. So not great news, and most of these fires, I know at least 2 of them are human caused, and that kind of frustrates me. Of course, I get on my soapbox about fire bans, but fire bans are there for a reason. Follow them. You're not special. You don't get to break their rules, and as we can tell, the devastation from human activities is avoidable. And there's fire bans for a reason. Follow them, please. So that's what I'll say about that. I think, let's see. Yeah, I think the Williams Fork fire is 16% contained at this point at 12,000 acres, but the Cameron Peak fire is still only 8% contained. And that's pretty much the bad news, but I will jump to North Platte Basin Roundtable news. We're going to have a meeting on the 21st, so this coming Monday. There are going to be 2 separate times for the meetings so that we can limit meeting attendance in person to just 8 people. So there's a 5 to 7 block, a 7 to 9 block, or a Zoom option. And the agenda for this upcoming Monday will be considering the WSRF applications for Meadow Creek Reservoir and for a project done by the Colorado State Forest. And Wilson Water Group will also be attending the meeting, and the main agenda item there will be the BIP update status. And that's pretty much most of my news, and I guess I'm sorry I don't have a better update or a more upbeat update. It's pretty bleak right now, but I'll just end that and take any questions.
Thank you, Director Trick. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, let's move on to the South Platte, Director Jan.
All right, thank you. Good morning, y'all. I'm not even from the South. So we have things going on pretty much as usual in the farming community out here. You know, it's harvest time for a few things. I don't have any slides, but I did meet with, we're doing a film for the South Platte Basin Roundtable and the Metro Roundtable of the South Platte Basin, and Christy Bodie is doing that. So she came out, and I was able to host her at my house, and we were able to take some drone footage of sugar beet harvest, much like the potato harvest you saw last year. Sugar beet harvest is pretty similar. And we also shot some footage of corn silage harvesting. So it was pretty exciting day. I had our local crop duster take us up in a plane, and we were able to get some footage of the South Platte River and the return photos associated with that. So as you know, down in our end of the river's dried up in several points, and she wanted to know the best way to show that, and the best way, of course, is from the air. So you see one river diversion drying it up, and shortly downstream there's the river that comes back, and someone else is using that water. So we are dependent on those return flows. And Director Ryan mentioned yesterday about what the outlook for storage is, and this isn't unusual for us out here at all. And a lot of times we at the North Sterling fill our reservoir completely on return flows. So Jackson Reservoir is about 60 miles, 70 miles upstream, their diversion, and they're senior to us, so they'll take the entire river at their location. But there's about 350 CFS that returns back to the river from recharge and irrigated agriculture that we're able to divert. And of course, we have to do it all winter. We have to store during the ice times, but we get it done, and I don't see this year being any different. If we have prolonged droughts, then the return flows do diminish somewhat, but this year it shouldn't be a problem. The North Sterling Reservoir, we're about 17% full, which is, it's about like the rest of the Plains reservoirs out here, and Pruitt is about 36% full. The good thing was it was really kind of cold. We had a little bit of freeze in some areas on September 8th. It didn't freeze as hard as Director Trick's North Platte Basin, but we did get some freeze, and we got some moisture. So anywhere between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, both snow and rain. So it was really pretty good for our area. And what that did with that cold snap and that little bit of rain, the demand on the river went way down. And what that does, it allows our direct flow to come into priority. So when people saw this coming and it got cold, the demand went down so far that we were able to take water into our reservoir. And we have a direct flow right, a 1914 direct flow right, which isn't in priority very often, and usually not this time of year. But right now we've been running for over a week, and our farmers are able to, which we were getting pretty low in storage, and some farmers were out of water, which isn't unusual either. But so we're able to take some of that water into the reservoir and run it right back out. So we're diverting about 460 cubic feet per second this morning. And there's at Kersey, which is about 90 miles upstream of our diversion, there's only 380 CFS there. But as I said, between the return flows, there's several people taking in between us, but there's still 460 for us to take. So the outlook has kind of come up in our area because of that cold snap and the moisture that we got. So, you know, actually right now we have some really beautiful days and spectacular sunsets, which is a result of the fire. And I really feel bad for all those that are affected by the fire. And we have seen even clear out in our area some of the ash from those. So yeah, my heart goes out to those that have been affected by it, and my prayers as well. On the Basin Roundtable front, we're just doing our Basin implementation plan. We have weekly meetings of several committees to do our update for the Basin implementation plan, and that's where most of our focus is going right now. The other thing, I'll just hit on this and that, and I'll call it good. Oh, I forgot to mention, the Julesburg Reservoir is a smaller reservoir, and they did dry the reservoir fairly well, and they lifted all the limits for fish, and they also salvaged a lot of fish and put them into North Sterling. North Sterling, even when we are down to the bottom of our outlet tubes, we still have about 12 feet of water and about 600 surface acres. So a lot of times other reservoirs that have fish that they want to save, they'll bring them to North Sterling, and we can store fish too. So that'll help out next year. The other thing that's probably noteworthy is Aurora Water came to our area and purchased a ditch system. So right near the Merino area, which actually diverts, where the Pruitt Reservoir diverts, we actually divert water to this ditch. So this ditch was there before the Pruitt. And when the Pruitt came in 1910, it took over the diversion structure, and it diverts water to the north side of the reservoir for this ditch, and it's called the Tetzel Ditch. And Aurora, this ditch was for sale, so it's not, Aurora just came down and purchased 97% of that ditch. And it's a little over 1,000 acres of farm ground. They also purchased a ditch in the Windsor area on the Pooter, which is about 2,500 acres of farm ground, the Whitney Ditch. So those two deals, the Tetzel Ditch was about $14.5 million purchase, and the Whitney Ditch, I believe it was $26.5 million. So that's kind of what we were hoping to stay away from in our area, is the purchase of agriculture land, and kind of a stark contrast to that is Parker Water and Sanitation District they filed for a water right in 2019, December of 2019, along with the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District. And I have brought this up to you before, and we've been continuing to work with Parker Water and Sanitation District on getting together an agreement to use the Pruitt Reservoir somewhat as a forebay, but make improvements for our farmers at the same time, let our farmers continue to farm. And actually, they're not going to be taking any, as part of this project, not taking any farms, even the ones they own, which they own some of the farms down in this area. They're not even taking those out of production, and they still will meet the water that they need. So they've been very open to our ideas down here, and we're looking forward to working with them. And yesterday when we were talking about demand management and everything, and of course we're curtailed a lot, so I have to kind of step out of my basin and get over to the western slope and just see what it's like for other people. But one of the things that, as I thought about it this morning, that's kind of similar is, it's just what we saw this last month. Aurora buying up farm ground and Parker working with farmers. We can go either of those ways. And I like the idea where we work with municipalities to do these different ideas. Not that Aurora might not come around to some of these ideas as well, but to work with these ideas before things take place where we can't go back. And so that's what I like about this Parker project. They're working, they're taking our ideas, they're running, and it's actually a win-win for both of us. And so I think of that as, on the demand management front, it's all voluntary, and it's similar to our farmers. This is a voluntary thing that we're doing. We don't have to allow Parker into our system, but we look at it as we have a choice, and we can work with it and come up with good ideas together, or we can just go down the path that's been going down, and that's the buy and drive agriculture. And on the western slope, it could be the same thing. We're looking at voluntary things happening, and it's just looking into them and coming up with ideas. It's not a done deal by any means. So I guess maybe my analogy isn't entirely correct, but I think it's somewhat a good analogy on what farmers. I just like to give farmers options of what. I don't want to take their right to sell their property or whatever they want to do with their water, but I also want to give them options so that they don't have to. So I guess I'll just stop right there and take any questions.
Thank you, Director Yan. Are there any questions? Well, seeing none, we can move over to the Arkansas River Basin. Director Felt.
Thank you, Celine. I think that since I spoke with you last, what we've experienced here in the Arkansas Basin, in the water community maybe, is a lot of extremes, and Labor Day, that Monday, Labor Day, it was the smokiest day in Chaffee County in anyone's lifetime. I mean, I spoke with people who were 80 years old, lived here all their life, and they were like, I've never seen it like this. Couldn't see anything. We believe most of that was coming all the way down from Cameron Peak. But the next day, we got the most snow anybody could remember that early, and as much as 15 inches in the Salida area. And it really did a number on everyone's garden. Almost every tree in town suffered some damage because they're all leafed out. It was just such a roller coaster. And I think in the context of COVID too, we had 3 days of no blue sky and precipitation, which is, extremely unusual in the upper Arkansas Valley. We're in such a rain shadow here, but it really did give people a wake-up call too, that, as they say in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. We have not lived through COVID during the dark, cold part of the year, and we had an extremely warm spring. So I think it really shook us all up here that, gosh, we've got the hardest part of the year still to go. And, in the role I play in my county, a lot of challenges ahead in terms of dealing with that. On the river, Rob Harris yesterday with Parks and Wildlife mentioned the FLOW program, the Voluntary Flow Management Program, and what a success that was this year. You know, we had 700 CFS through August 15th, which is always the goal of the program, maintain that base flow for recreation. And as I went through the summer, I kept clicking on certain gauges around the state that I felt like, you know, here's a river that people recreate on, and here's kind of like the key gauge in my mind. And every time I looked at those, they were all below the 25th percentile. And we were tracking right at, you know, maybe slightly below the 50-year average, but basically right there. And of course, by August 18th or 19th, we were below the 25th percentile as well. So the flow program just does an incredible job for us here. Visitation to the Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area from May through August was up 21% in terms of people who actually visited the facilities. Our sales tax in Chaffee County in July, which is our biggest month of the year in terms of the amount of economic activity, it grew by 11%. And there's been some discussion about that Wayfair decision and in terms of taxing online sales and getting the money back into local coffers. July was the first month where we had an apples to apples. We had gone through a year of that program or that new methodology. And so to be up 11% in your biggest month of the year, it was just insane. And we're still scratching our heads on that, but I think it certainly in part ties to all the visitation that we've had here. And a key element of that was the flow program. And so I really want to echo what Rob said. You know, thanks to Southeastern, thanks to the Bureau, and particular thanks to Alan Ward at Pueblo Board of Waterworks, who could foresee the challenges we had coming. And in addition to the 10,000 acre feet that Southeastern sets aside, he set aside 10,000 acre feet that he could have moved down from Clear Creek and Twin Lakes earlier in the year, held it back until the flow program started, and then created kind of a base flow on top of native for Southeastern and the Bureau to then augment against. So just really made a difference, and I appreciate Rob making those comments, because it is a voluntary program, it is a cooperative program, and someday I hope to maybe do a little presentation to all of you about how it works, because I think it's good food for thought. It may be replicable in other areas. We did not have any significant fires yet in the basin. You know, the Decker fire started September 8th last year, so we're certainly not out of the woods. But we, not only did we not have any major fires, and I should say we probably have had 20 to 30 starts in the upper basin, and they either went out or got knocked out really quickly. We're on a total suppression mode this year, in part because of COVID. But we didn't have fires, but we also didn't really have much in the way of rains. The last weekend of July was kind of our big monsoon event. That was the only one we had. We were really fortunate that Hayden Pass fire burn scar, which has run off every year since 2016, did not have any muddy runoff. And then we had two events coming out of the Decker fire burn scar. This photograph right here on the screen, you can see just really dirty water coming out at the bottom of the screen. So that's the flow out of Bear Creek, which is normally flowing about 2 or 3 CFS at the end of July, was running about 400 or something like that. You can see though that the water's dirty above that confluence too. That's because the night before we had a dry wash also blow and spew a bunch of ash out and dirt. You want to go to the next slide, Vivian? And then this is just another shot coming up here. I don't know if you can, yeah, there we go. So that's looking downstream from the confluence too. And so we did have, you know, a fairly significant couple of flash floods out of the Decker Creek fire. And I got to say, I was really mortified with this one. It just looked like what happened with Hayden Pass. And I felt like, gosh, you know, this is probably 18 miles upstream of where we were seeing the damage from Hayden. And it really felt like, wow, we're losing all of Bighorn Sheep Canyon now. You know, the heart and soul of the gold medal water on the Arkansas. The next morning, this shot was taken at like 6 p.m. probably. The next morning, I went downstream and looked at it, and it looked like dirty dishwater. And what we found is that this ash wasn't, there wasn't as much as there appeared, and it also didn't seem to have the same composition that we saw coming out of Hayden. And so what looked horrific turned out to be mostly rock and sand and gravel with just some ash kind of mixed in, but it all blew through pretty quickly. And so we were very grateful for that. I want to call out Kevin Hauk. You know, I know he and I have met before, but like I don't really know him. And he got in touch with me going into that weekend and said, "Hey, man, just want you to be aware of what we're looking at here." You know, he was talking about this being a very rare convergence of forces to create a significant monsoon event. And I just want to call him out and thank him, because he and I communicated by phone and text Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you know, Sunday morning, 9 a.m., he's talking to me on the phone, you know, and getting updates. And I just really appreciated both his commitment and enthusiasm, I guess, and also concern. And it helped me prepare a little better so that we were able to, like, for example, Canyon City has a direct flow diversion for their water supply. It comes right out of the river, you know, and we needed to let them know that this ash was coming down their way, because they really didn't want that in their system. So we made some plans, and I just appreciate his commitment on all that. As regards the Decker Fire, one other element, we secured funding last winter from the Natural Resource Conservation Service to do an emergency watershed protection plan. And so we had about 7 properties that we were doing pretty significant work on to protect from flash flooding. And we're just about done with that. We'll get it done before the deadline. So that was a good thing to have in place. I think I mentioned last time, you know, we've had some turnover here. Chelsea Nutter, who was running the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative, retired. Amber Weber, who's been running PEPO, our, you know, the public education and outreach program, has stepped back. And then Christy Knackert, who is running the Arkansas River Basin Water Forum, also stepped back. And so we're kind of in this transition right now. And I want to thank Carol Acarius, who people probably often associate with the South Platte more than the Arkansas, but she's really stepped in to kind of be interim director for the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative, which is doing a lot of fire mitigation work in our basin. And she's going to kind of fill in an interim role there until we figure out next steps for that group. So I wanted to thank her too. With our Basin Roundtable, I think like a lot of things, it is starting to suffer a bit from Zoom. There is a nice element when people don't have to drive from Leadville to Pueblo and from Baca County to Pueblo. I mean, the carbon footprint alone, you could say, and the time involved in those monthly meetings is considerable, and Zoom does reduce that. But boy, you know, I think we're just starting to sacrifice some of our connectivity by not being together each month. And you know, it's playing out not really in a negative way necessarily, but in some conversations between the basin and some acknowledgments that maybe where the upper basin is more focused on water quantity, lower basin has some bigger focuses on water quality. And I find it kind of interesting that I'm sitting on this board now, and Mike Weber, who works with the Lower Ark district, is now on the Water Quality Control Commission. So kind of speaks to maybe where our emphases are, and you know, the different focal points that we have. We are working like everybody on our basin implementation plan updates, and we have upper and lower basin workshops coming up in the next 10 days. And I'll be helping facilitate the one in the upper basin in particular. I think I maybe would just kind of wrap up with, you know, with all of us not being able to be together periodically, I'm starting to really feel that too. And I only had one chance to be with you all. And even that was not maybe quite representative of CWCB, in that we were in Lakewood or Littleton or one of those communities there, and just in a hotel, and we didn't do any field trips or any of that kind of stuff. But so I think what's tough about it is that we're all just in our little rooms here, and we're coming from our own frame of reference. And you may have sensed that from some of my comments yesterday, but you know, I feel like the national conflicts or polarization that's going on is definitely, you know, trickling down to the local level. Being in elected office, I am seeing a lot of that, whether it's kind of the national type topics or just people feeling that conflict or that desire to express their frustration coming out in issues that you wouldn't think would be that big a deal. And so while we're getting ready to renew the 1041 permit, or I shouldn't say renew, review, let's be clear, review the 1041 permit for the Nestle, which, you know, they pump some water out of some wells here, truck it to Denver and bottle it. And, you know, there's a lot of concerns about the plastic bottles and all that. The things that we're actually able to address in our 1041 regs and our land use code don't include plastic water bottles, for example. They're fairly limited, but I mean, I'm getting 20, 30 emails a day about Nestle, and our hearing is still over a month away from now. The homestake discussion about perhaps adding a reservoir up in the Holy Cross Wilderness is another one that's of real concern. The amount of email I'm getting on that, when basically our only role in Chaffee County is we have a little segment of the homestake pipeline comes through. That's really it. We don't have any authority over this. But you know, people are really upset, and so you know, I'm heading into an election here coming up. By the time I see you again, I'm unopposed, which is really a luxury right now. But there are 3 other candidates running for the other seat, so just a lot of noise, a lot of clamor up here, and I think it's just spinning off in all directions. So I miss being with all of you where we can talk about some of this stuff over a beer instead of over Zoom, and you know, kind of that moderating influence that the group has on the individual. So hopefully that will resume sometime soon. In the meanwhile, if you do happen to be coming through Chaffee County, please reach out. I'd love to meet you just for a streamside beer or whatever. I'll make it happen. So that's all I have, and it's great to be with you all.
Thank you, Director Felt. Are there any questions? Director Schwartz.
Oh, and thank you. And thanks for, that's, you know, so insightful to understand and knowing your county well. I don't envy you on that bottling issue, because it was pretty contentious. And how many restrictions did you put in 1041? Like 40 restrictions or something. So you're revisiting that issue. It's very interesting that the passion that people bring to those concerns. And I'll never forget your middle schoolers that came and actually proposed a plastic bottle bill at the Capitol, and they wanted to put a tax on it. And it was good for them. They just put it together and organized it. It was all a result of that Nestle bottling. And unfortunately, it lost in committee, but and I don't think it was the best day at the legislature commenting that the kids have been brainwashed. But I think that the kids were on the right track, and we can learn from them from time to time, and maybe they are our hope as they bring insight and solutions that maybe we're too stuck and we can't see. So regardless, all the best with those issues, and I look forward to swinging over to Chaffee and not too long.
Thank you.
And Greg, this is one of the first years I haven't put my kayak in the Arkansas River, but I'll let you know if I make it over there.
Please do. Despite these photos, it is as beautiful as ever.
Let's move on to City and County of Denver, Director Brody.
Good morning, everyone. Well, Vivian has pulling up my slides, I just thought I'd give a quick update on COVID. It continues to be a really challenging time in the metro area, where we're continuing to see many effects of COVID on our ability to work, on our ability to socialize and recreate, on kids' ability to go to school. We have many schools in our area that are in full remote learning mode. Others are in hybrid mode. Others have tried to go back to school, some successfully, some have already had to go into quarantine. It continues to be a huge challenge in our area, and to Director Felt's point, I am concerned that with winter coming, socially, emotionally, and economically, this is going to be a really hard time for the greater metro community. Just by way of an example, the City and County of Denver put out its proposed budget for 2021. They are projecting a $220 million shortfall this year and a $190 million shortfall in 2021. So those are big numbers, even by Denver standards, and that has an impact on the city's ability to deliver important services. They are doing everything that they can to stretch the resources as much as possible, but with positions remaining vacant deliberately to stretch those budget dollars, it gets harder and harder to meet an increasing need of our community with fewer and fewer resources to do it. It will, I think, continue to be a challenging several months in the greater Denver area. If we could go to the next slide. Vivian, are you able to advance to the next slide? So, oh, one too many. So I thought with all the fire activity that we're seeing around our state, and the concern that has for our Colorado friends and neighbors, as well as for our watersheds, I thought it might be a good time to highlight the From Forest to Faucets program that Denver Water has participated in. This is an effort that grew out of our experience in the '96 Buffalo Creek wildfire and also the 2002 Hayman wildfire, both which had pretty significant impacts on watersheds in our collection area. That picture on the bottom right is the Strontia Springs Reservoir, which you can see in the text, received about 40 years worth of sediment from that one fire event out of Buffalo Creek. We are still dealing with sedimentation in that reservoir today, and that reservoir is really kind of a key collection point in our collection area that feeds into our largest treatment facility. So if you could go to the next slide. Out of those experiences in '96 and 2002, we initiated a collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service and then expanded it to both state and federal agencies. We developed a methodology to identify particular zones of concern based on forest health and based on potential impacts to the watershed. And from there have been implementing treatments that are jointly funded by Denver Water, and our federal and state partners to address some of those areas. And if you can go to the next slide, that shows some of the benefits of the program. So this is just one example. The Buffalo Mountain wildfire in 2018, a wildfire broke out in Silverthorne, but fortunately, because this area had received treatment through Forest to Faucets, those fire breaks allowed firefighters to get in there and contain it before it could do hundreds of millions of dollars in damage to the surrounding area. And again, this is just one example. But I know we've been spending a lot of time lately talking about demand management and opportunities to collaborate. I think forest health is another area where I see real potential for us to grow collaborations like this, because watershed health is something that impacts all of us across the state on both sides of the divide. If Trans Mountain diverters, are collecting from the West Slope, we need to contribute to make sure that those forests are healthy, both for the benefit of the watershed and also for the surrounding communities. And so I'm hoping that this Forest of Faucets example is one we can build upon and increase collaboration with water providers and also those local communities that are being impacted by fire. Next slide. I thought I'd also just give a quick update on our lead reduction program. We are closing in on our goal of delivering over 100,000 filters to residents across our service area. We will meet that goal ahead of schedule this month, which is fantastic. We have also really ramped up our lead service line inventory efforts. And essentially what that does is that helps us verify which of the suspected lines are lead and which aren't. That helps us build our plan going into future years of where we're going to focus our efforts first in terms of those service line removals. I also wanted to highlight our lead service line replacement program. We are at over 3,000 lines replaced. We had a slow start this year because of COVID. March and April would have been the months where we had originally planned to ramp up those line replacements. But due to COVID, we had to hit pause while we developed protocols for doing that work in as safe a manner as possible, since that requires us to have crews interact with residents and often go into homes to make those connections. But in the last few months, we've really ramped up that effort significantly, and we are on track to meet our annual goal sometime in November. So again, ahead of schedule, that gives us a little bit of float in our schedule in case we run into bad weather, in case we have COVID spikes, or in case we have other unanticipated challenges. That will ensure our ability to meet our overall goal within the calendar year. I also just wanted to highlight the great results we've seen on our pH implementation. So as part of the program, not only are we providing filters, not only are we replacing lead service lines, we also did increase the pH of our water to provide better corrosion control. And we've seen a fantastic result from those efforts. Our 90th percentile lead levels has come down to 6.7 ppb, which is the lowest we've been in quite some time. So all in all, we are hitting all of our metrics, and we're doing so either on or ahead of schedule. One other challenge that we faced with COVID was how to conduct our communications, outreach, and education activities. We had planned to do a whole series of in-person, face-to-face meetings and engagements around those communities that are most impacted by lead service lines. We, again, had to take a step back and figure out how to do that remotely. But we've had a lot of success with those remote efforts. We've had nearly 9,000 people participate live in those engagement events. We've had 19 different events, and we've sent out over 3 million communications, either electronic or by mail, to those in the program. So overall, we're really, really proud of the ways that our team has innovated in the face of many challenges this year to make sure we are delivering on our commitments to the EPA and to CDPHE, and that we are making a huge positive impact on public health. And if you could turn to the next slide, I thought I'd end on a positive note with just a couple of nice images. I'm spending nearly all my time in and around my home these days. I, like many folks, I'm working remotely and will do so through the rest of the calendar year. So these are just a couple of shots from the last couple of weeks. You may remember in my July meeting, I showed a nice picture of that deer previously on the other side of the walkway, but here's the deer just grazing on some grass in our parks. It likes to hang out down in that big stand of trees. That's a water quality detention pond, which is really nice and lush. So good habitat. And then the picture on the left is from our little brief snowstorm in September. One of the advantages of remote learning is as soon as your class is done, you get to put on your snow boots and head outside and play. So that's my 9-year-old, very proud of his first snowman of the year. It was that nice, heavy, wet snow, so it was a good opportunity for him to have some good old-fashioned fun in the snow. And it's a good reminder to me that despite all of the stresses and the challenges that we're all facing, it's also important to celebrate those everyday moments of joy and to not lose that inner child in all of us. So thank you. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Director Brody. Director Gibbs.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Director Brody, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing the Forest to Faucets highlights. That's definitely near and dear to my heart. I actually have a poster of your slide of the Buffalo Mountain Fire, and that's really textbook in terms of how you bring diverse stakeholders together. And with the right funding stream through Denver Water, U.S. Forest Service was able to take care of the thinning and defensible space on Forest Service land. The county stepped in, Colorado State Forest Service, the Buffalo Metro District helped pay for thinning around their water cistern. You help protect the Salt Lick Creek that comes right down the mountain. So the U.S. Forest Service would not be able to fund that project if Denver Water didn't step up. And, you know, putting in $1 million altogether helped save 2,600 units. That fire was running down towards all those homes and condos and was able to save $1 billion of value of that property. So just want to say thank you so much. And, you know, looking at landscape scale management and thinning is something that really takes years of planning. And so the fact that Denver Water has continued to be an important funding partner has really helped out, you know, local communities, Forest Service, and all the partners to really look at, you know, looking through a lens of community wildfire protection plans and where best to protect our watersheds, where best we can protect critical infrastructure and communities. So thank you, thank you.
It's our pleasure. Frankly, you know, we view it as a really smart investment. It's always better to spend a dollar on protection than having to mitigate and rehabilitate and rebuild. And like I said, my hope is that we can expand upon the successes and bring others to the table as well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the Rio Grande. Director Dutton.
Awesome. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Can I share my screen? Awesome. Thank you. I, for the first time ever, didn't think I had anything to say, and then was inspired by Director Ryan. So here we go. I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about what's happening in the Rio Grande this year, but really in the context of what kind of we live with every year, which is when I describe the Rio Grande Basin to people, I describe it as an area of extremes. And so not only do we have these huge temporal fluctuations, and so you can see that we jostle back and forth with Rabbit Ears Pass on having the most snow in Colorado on Wolf Creek Pass. And so you can see, you know, we have these incredible areas of high amounts of precipitation and snow. And then down in center Colorado, just north of where I grew up, is the lowest average annual precipitation in the state. And so every year sets us up for an extreme year, just across our geography. But then from year to year, we get these incredible fluctuations as well. And so, I mean, you can see even just from 2019, which was awesome. We got above 900,000 acre feet of flow at the Del Norte gauge, to this year where we're projected to have less than 400,000. And these kind of jumps, while they're shocking and really hard to deal with and hard to manage for, you can see that we have these kind of jumps in history where the 80s were pretty great, and then all of a sudden they weren't. And then, you know, every once in a while, you never know when it's going to be a great year and when it's going to be a hard year. And so this is something that we are accustomed to and that we live with, but it's incredibly challenging. And it's pretty subtle on this graph, but you can just see how the long-term average is trending down, because this is the entire history of the gauge, and the Del Norte gauge is one of the oldest gauges in the state, and I think actually in the country. It's a pretty old gauge, and so we have this incredible record, and you can see over time how we're trending downward for our average, and so that is upsetting and shocking, but not a unique story across the West. Something that does startle me is that we heard from a presenter at our roundtable meeting a few years ago that we are the lowest snow-driven watershed in the hemisphere for the South, and so that makes us especially vulnerable to climate change and to fluctuations in snowpack. And so as we start to see less precipitation coming in the form of snow and more coming in the form of rain, we anticipate that will lead to lower flows in our stream overall, just with percolation and water sinking into the soil and everything. And so those are things that are startling and that we're trying to brace ourselves for. So what is this that translate to? Director Ryan mentioned the compact and how Craig Cotton has the difficult task of administering this compact that is based on the annual flows at the Del Norte gauge, and that requires him then to try to use all the best science, and that's why our new radar project is so important and amazing. But still, Craig has the job of trying to sort out how much flows does he think are going to come across the Del Norte gauge, which then triggers how much water needs to go to the New Mexico across the gauge at the state line. And so we talk about that kind of offhand or just how it is this thing that happens, but I wanted to show you what that means. And so every 10 days, Craig sends out his 10-day analysis where he uses all the data he can to try to put together what he thinks is going to happen. And so in the beginning of the year, there's a lot of X's here. There's a lot of estimates and forecasts. And so since we're getting towards the end of the year, this sheet is getting filled out, which is super helpful. But you can see that it shows, so we have this is what the total index this year he believes is going to be. And for reference, the average, long-term average on the Rio Grande is about 640,000 acre feet. And so the year just continues to get worse and worse for us down here as we're dropping in our flows. And so these are the flows that have already crossed the gauge. This is what he's estimating will happen in the next few months. So of the flows that crossed, this is what was delivered. And so, obviously in May, we had our highest flows, and of that 9,300 acre feet were curtailed so that we could meet our compact obligations. And so you can see that the total amount that he anticipates will be delivered, and then with various credits, the amount that Craig estimates will deliver is about 8,000 acre feet over the obligation, which Craig tries to hit it right on the nose or to over deliver slightly, just to avoid any litigation or any kind of opportunity for naysayers to say that we're not meeting our compact obligations. So it's an incredibly difficult job that Craig has, and I try to do nice things for him when I can, because he's in a tough task of trying to decide or trying to figure out what's going to happen, and then his decisions, he physically is shutting down head gates. And so that's the nitty gritty of what compact administration looks like in our basin. Every morning, the first email I get is from the water commissioner, Sam, and this is pretty small, but I didn't intend for you to read everything, but more just to get the picture that, so this is the 10-day analysis. This is the day-to-day after Craig sets the curtailment for every 10 days. This is where the rubber meets the road. And so the water commissioner applies the curtailment, And then I always immediately jump to the last priority served. I'm a member of the Rio Grande Canal, and our biggest decree comes in at 216. And so I'm always looking, are we there? Are we below? And then our district owns water in the Anaconda ditch. And so those are the first 2 ditches that my eyes jump through. And then I start sorting through, well, what are the flows at all the gauges? And so this is a pretty powerful sheet, but this is where the water users look to say, am I in or am I out today? And of course they get calls and visits from the water commissioners, but these are how things happen on the ground here. And so those limitations and those challenges that we see with both the varying flow from year to year, and then the challenges that people see when they have a plan for irrigation and they get curtailed, have led to the use of groundwater that we talked about Tuesday. But I mean, this is where another challenge exists, that we've, we have this pretty successful economy and thriving agriculture community that, because the flows are so variable, is now so dependent on groundwater. And we're so fortunate because we have these aquifers that can be recharged, and especially the shallower of the two, the unconfined, can be readily recharged and has been built up and then drawn down over time. And so this is a really helpful document or map that shows how the unconfined is recharged with, and the closed basin is recharged with inflows from creeks and diversions into the closed basin through some pretty major canals. And so that then gets us to where we are today. There's this direct tie. This graph is old, you can see, but the point is that there's this tie that we see between inflows. So the green bars they're that histograph that I showed. And so you can see the flows that, coming down the river and then get diverted into the closed basin as we see fewer flows in the river, and then changes in climate. So 2002 is a great example of where there wasn't a lot of water and it was really hot and dry. And so we kind of have this, this average pumping level, but in 2002, things really, really got to a head because it was hot and dry, so people pumped more, and inflows in the river were from the river into the closed basin were so dismal that we saw a huge drop in the aquifer. And so that really highlights where we are today, that the challenges in this basin, it's not just from overuse and mining the aquifer and pumping too much water. It also is this trend in downward supply is really impacting our ability to try to conserve. We need to conserve water, we need to reduce pumping, but we also could really use Mother Nature's help in having this inflow so that we can put water into the aquifer. And so without that cooperation from the water supply, we get into the need to do projects like I was visiting with you all about on Tuesday, and to be creative. And so we've had some pretty neat meetings recently. Senator Bennett was in the Valley, and then Governor Polis was in the Valley, and during both meetings, it was emphasized that, we really need support from the state and from the federal government in the conservation programs that we're working on, and that we're working really hard on soil health and alternate crops and trying to use technology to our benefit. But as Director Ryan mentioned, it's a pretty tough situation. And so that's where we're at. And I guess there's no sugarcoating that we've seen this incredible drop in the aquifer even this year. We had kind of bumped along. Things really dropped a couple of years ago, but we were making good progress towards the goal of getting the unconfined aquifer to negative 400,000 acre feet. And then all the gains that we had gotten were lost between 2018. We got kind of back, I guess not all the gains, but a significant portion. We got a little bit back last year and then have dropped off again. And September is when we find out, the end of September is when we find out where we're at. And so we're anticipating it's not going to be pretty. And it just emphasizes the need for us to continue to work together and try to find solutions to reduce pumping in the basin through creative projects. It's not all bad news though. there's still a lot of really great things happening. And in the Parks and Wildlife report, it was mentioned that that our local CPW office is working to try to improve stream flows, and especially with releases out of Beaver. Beaver Park Reservoir was part of the Rio Grande Cooperative Project a couple of years ago, and had a significant facelift and some incredible dam and spillway improvements. And my district, the San Luis Valley Water Conservancy District, has been working with CPW this year to try to be pretty creative, where we exchanged a lot of water into CPW when flows were high in the river, into Beaver Park with CPW when flows were high in the river. And then next month into the winter, we'll be releasing water. The beneficial use of that water will be augmentation. So we'll be making up impacts for the wells that are part of the district's augmentation program. But we also will be improving stream flows in Beaver Creek, the South Fork, and the Rio Grande when flows are really low. And we'll be extending that into the winter, which is an incredibly important and kind of vulnerable time for trout. And so that has the benefit of protecting habitat, improving flows, but also by releasing our water for augmentation in the winter time, that will allow CPW to store more of their own water when otherwise they would release their own flows. And so I think that that's the type of arrangement that was really entertained when the cooperative project was dreamt up. And so I'm just excited to share what we're doing with Beaver Park and the opportunities that are there now that it's fully rehabbed, and that was something that was done through the project spill. So pretty exciting. And then we're also working pretty hard on the BIP update, and Bethany Howell is with a grant she received from CWCB, is working really hard on roundtable communications. She has launched a podcast series, so you can follow the roundtable on our Facebook page and pick up podcasts and hear some really cool people talking about cool things. And then just as an aside, a lot of you know and love Emma Reeser as much as I do, the executive director of the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. And on September 10th, sorry, Jim, we were hoping for the 9th, but on September 10th, Emma welcomed a baby boy. And so we are very excited to have a new little water guy in the basin. And I'm sad to say I haven't got my hands on him yet, but I'm pretty excited to meet him. Lastly, I was asked to share some pictures from, look, it's not the Rio Grande, from the Colorado River. As I mentioned yesterday, I was fortunate enough to be rafting the river for a few weeks late in August and earlier this month. And I was part of a USGS Grand Canyon monitoring program or project. And so we were monitoring vegetation in the canyon to see how dam operations have affected vegetation. And so this picture shows a friend of mine and a couple of the other botanists who I was one of the grunt laborers. And so we would set up transects perpendicular to the river with different points for the botanists to measure the vegetation. And then while they were doing that, the rest of us would measure the elevation of the plots from the river and take photo points and slope and aspect. And so once that data all gets back to the shop, they'll be able to figure out and report how the vegetation at different levels above the river has changed over time, or just what the condition of the vegetation is. And sometimes it was nice sandy beaches like this, and other times it was tunneling through tamarisk and mesquite. And I was pretty glad I took work gloves for a couple of the sites. A side note is this is in front of Redwall Cavern. I felt like this is pretty iconic Grand Canyon fieldwork photo. There was a wedding going on inside, so it was quite the to-do. I'm hoping we're in the background of some of the photos. There's Vulcan's Anvil, so the river runners on this meeting know what that means. Things are about to get pretty chaotic below this picture. And just as always, the canyon left me feeling inspired and appreciative, and just grateful to get to do what I do and be part of the conversations that we're having. So that is my report.
Thank you, Director Dutton. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will move to the Yampa White Basin. Director Brown.
Well, of course, I get to follow the Grand Canyon photos, which is not easy. So I don't have a slideshow for you all today. just wanted to, try to put a better spin on the bad news that, of course, our basin has not escaped from as well. Pretty much par for the course. In 2020, I saw a picture of a roll of barbed wire, which said, if 2020 were a hula hoop, it would be made of barbed wire, which I thought was pretty appropriate. So up here in the Yampa White Basin, the Yampa River went on call on August 25th this year for the second time ever. Very similar situation as 2018. Obviously made harder by the conditions not related to weather, the cattle prices, and the extreme wind events that we have had all summer, making just the drought a little bit worse than it was, I think, in 2018. And so, seeing that, there was a couple organizations that got together to see how we could relieve the call on the Yampa, which I know is, very different from many of your basins. But this was an opportunity where Elkhead Reservoir, which is below Steamboat Springs and northeast of Craig, holds water, and the River District, the Colorado River District, has a pool of water that's typically, well, it's available every year for people to lease water, but because of the way agriculture works in our basin, there's very few agriculturalists that can budget for water releases outside of the South Route community, which has leases out of Yamcola, which is up higher in the basin. So this year, like all years, there was water available, and the River District and my employer, Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, came together, and we were able to each release, Tri-State released 500 acre feet of our pool that we have in Elkhead, and the River District released 700 acre feet. And the Water Trust, using some of CWCB's funding, was able to release another 250 with the help of funding raised by the Water Trust as well. So part of the water released, well, all of the water released through CWCB and the Water Trust was for fish flows, which were obviously low. And the rest of the water that was released was just water released into the river. So the call went off on September 3rd, and people were able to go back to regular irrigation schedules, which in our basin really means that putting some water down on the fields allows folks to bring their cattle from the high country back down and eat a little bit more before, whatever their operations call for as we get closer to winter. And in some cases, ranchers were faced with the hard choices of just bringing their animals to the barn right out of the high country. So that obviously lends itself to lower pricing and, just makes an already bad year worse. So I think that we were lucky. We were able to do some things that, frankly, were just creative and made for a good alleviation, I guess. So that was a good thing. So I see that as a positive in a year of trials and tribulations. So we had a very interesting event happen in Routt County, and I know that sort of this corridor that runs Highway 40 from Steamboat all the way into Utah, and I don't know what happened on the Front Range, but we had a massive low pressure storm from the east on September 8th, which recreated events from 1997, which we refer to as the Routt Divide Blowdown. And we had winds on Mount Warner, which is the Steamboat Springs ski area, upwards of 114 miles an hour. So we had tons of trees down, electrical infrastructure went down. You know, I was on Gates of Lodore on the Green River at the time, which also had intense 75-mile-an-hour winds and snow. And so we experienced our own interesting weather event down there, but up here in our basin certainly just really got racked from this strange event that happened. So, you know, obviously that loosens up trees in the forests. So we expect that we'll see a lot more trees go down as well, much as we did after the 1997 event. So that is kind of an interesting thing that occurred. And I know that Curran, Director Chick, talked about the fires. We are definitely in the smoky haze right now from the Middle Fork fire, which has reached 5,000 acres and is likely predicted to burn until the weather really changes here in the next, well, who knows? None of us know. When will winter come? Anyone know? Tomorrow? Next week? So that's really all I had, but I did want to say thank you to, now his name is escaping me, Director Gibbs, for all of his work on the fires. In a past life, I worked with the Colorado Forest Service and State Forest Service, and I know how intense fire season can be, and we certainly haven't gotten a break here in Colorado and obviously across the West. And I read an interesting article out of High Country News, you know, talking about the mental impacts on our firefighters and what they deal with after experiencing large fires, and especially when there's injuries and trauma to the folks around them. And so, you know, really made me think of not only are these folks away from their families and their normal lives and rituals, but they're also, you know, dealing with all of the repercussions that come from being an emergency responder. And so thank you to Dan for his service, and for those of you, you know, who have family and friends that also do that. Thank you for what you give up while those people are away as well. So here's looking at a better report in November, I hope, but thank you for listening, and that's concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Brown. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the Colorado River. Director Schwartz. Director Schwartz, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And it really is nice, even though these are, you know, trying days to relate and share information. But I think it's all so valuable in terms of what position we're in to support this state. And so I just would start with looking at issues around COVID. Maybe that's sort of our underlying challenge, and certainly seeing you know, in our area, basically from Aspen to Parachute, going down the Colorado, you know, we've seen like 12% unemployment. We have 750 households that are receiving food distributions every week, and a family per day is being evicted, and of course we have all the families being evacuated for wildfires, which are really challenging in itself. And I guess I will start with this view of the Grizzly wildfire and looking at the views from our perspective just south of the fire. And I really hope that Director Gibbs will weigh in, but when you think about where that fire took place, even though the size doesn't compare to the Pine Gulch or the Cameron, that but the critical nature of that Grizzly fire was, Grizzly Creek fire was really something. So you think of the White River National Forest, as you probably know, it's 2.3 million acres, but it also surrounds the Glenwood Canyon. And that Glenwood Canyon holds such vital infrastructure for the West and for water in our region. So you have both the Shoshone plant, and then you have this artery, transportation artery across the West and I-70, which is really so critical as a transportation corridor. But we not only had I-70 closed, but then they closed Independence Pass, and then they closed, all the other smaller roads, Cottonwood and the Eagle Vale Road, closed all the other roads that to get in and out of this region. So it felt a little desperate. I mean, this shows a bit of a clear sky. It was before the smoke really inundated us, and was pretty, that red sun in the sky throughout the course of the day was really kind of frightening. But the impact on the region economically, when you think of Glenwood Springs and the impact on their recreation economy, which is, almost a $10 million economy with these rafting, 65,000 rafters going down that area. But I really think that and hopefully, Dan, you can weigh in, but the national firefighting assets that were brought to our region, but also the sensitivity of the firefighting strategies was super critical when we think about how complex the issues are when you already look at the unstable slopes of Glenwood Canyon and how that affects the river, the water quality, and I-70 and our ability to keep that open. But then we are looking at this transfer of the zebra mussels, as Director Gibbs and I know, making sure that we don't transmit any of these other water fleas or any of the other invasive species, as the crews and the machinery and the water drops were all active in that canyon. And then certainly the plant ecology Dr. Dunton is talking about, what's important. So how the equipment was handled, how the slopes were handled, where the fire was at the top, and having just driven through the canyon, on the left side across the river, it's all green, and on the right, it's all devastated. But you could tell the top was severely impacted. But what a time! And I think the federal support and the state support, and Kevin Houck, and I know you're on the phone here, would be nice to have a tour of that area, not having gone in during any of that time. But that's a very interesting issue and opportunity, and thinking about the Shoshone plant, how that was brought offline, obviously, but there was that protocol that went in place in 2016. It's an outage protocol anticipating the other times it was basically taken offline. But it was a really important issue because it could have impacted the flows in the Colorado River so seriously that we're fortunate to have that opportunity. So going from that Grizzly fire over to the Pine Gulch, which is now the largest in the state, and maybe we could go to the next slide since we are looking at that. And that's just another one of the perspectives, again, being 40 miles from the fire, but it's such anxiety, color of the skies. It almost brings back that sensation of being trapped in the valley and having these terrible skies. So maybe the next slide could be, can we bring that up? So then we had a nice little snow event in the high country. And then so this is Sopris, with that dusting on it, and so things, obviously we just need to be patient, can change. And this is a beautiful last weekend, looking across West Sopris Creek and seeing the irrigation going on, continuing to go, and West Sopris in the background with that beautiful, beautiful snow cover on it. But heading over a little further west, that Pine Grove fire with 139,000 acres, the largest, but that was started by lightning, but it was only stressed by, it was only so active as a result of the drought, stress on the vegetation, obviously so little moisture in that vegetation, and the extremely hot temperatures created some extreme fire behavior in, again, that those steep areas. And this is only just north of Grand Junction, and what it did for the region and the snow and the effects of that watershed. So it's been certainly a trying time, but and so our roundtable continues to function. We'll be having a meeting next week to kind of set up the meeting for the 28th, which will be the BIP update and conversations here. But I would just like to wrap up on this whole issue. I hope we're not, maybe I'll just speak for myself, a couple of frogs here watching this happen to us when we look at the reports, the ongoing reports that we're reading in the West and in Colorado around record heats, low precipitation. Maybe, I don't know, Vivian, if you were able to pull up maybe that drought map, if possible. Is there another slide after this one? Maybe not. But regardless, I think that we saw that in Director Trick's report initially, that drought map. That drought map is, I remember when the whole state was that color. But it is really sobering that we are seeing these kinds of impacts to our region, and it makes our work even more important and more serious as we are seeing these flows. They're, in some areas our flows are kind of average, but it's way below normal on the Crystal River and the Eagle River and the Colorado River at the Cameo. We're seeing this. This is a very trying time, and it really is calling for bold action, I think, on our part as we look at the climate forecasts. And it's not going to be unique to this year. And we could see that effects of that basically 2000 to 2018 on so many aspects of our state. And so we're paying the price, and we'll just hope that we don't see more fires. I know that Cameron fire is very significant and very serious to all the effects on the north, that northern part of the state and Rocky Mountain National Park, and looking at other assets. So with that, I feel I feel that we need to be bold, and we need to take this into consideration. This is not a snapshot. This is the new normal, and how we're willing to address that as we go forward as a commission. So I'm happy to take any questions about our basin.
Are there any questions for Director Schwartz?
And maybe ask Director Gibbs about some of those firefighting efforts and what you personally experienced. Unless he has left us momentarily.
All right, we can.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We'll now move into the San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores River Basin, which is my report. I do not have a slide deck for you today, and I will try to keep this short since we're a little over time. Wanted to start out by thanking Craig and Dewey for the service to the CWCB, but also to thank all of the staff for the incredible amount of work that they have been doing during the pandemic. I personally went through my first experience with my toddler coming home from daycare sick recently, navigated COVID testing as sites were getting shut down because they didn't have heaters for the unexpected cold weather, and really sort of drives home what I think Director Gibbs and Director Mitchell are already telling the staff, which is that it's a marathon, not a sprint through this pandemic. And I personally want our staff to take the time that they need to keep themselves healthy right now. So mental health is really strained right now. We're all dealing with our families. I'm still sick, and you guys may have seen that as I've been running the meeting for the last couple of days. So just want to acknowledge that this is a really trying time. It's a really trying time for us to be on multi-day, all-day meetings, and acknowledge the incredible amount of work that it takes to put this all together. So please take care of yourselves, take care of your families. We all know how committed you are to public service, but that is equally important right now. I feel like I don't need to reiterate the drought that's hitting the Southwest Basin. It's been a really tough year for water management. It's been a really tough year for water users. It's been a really tough year on the environment in the Southwest. And I think as I have had opportunities to go into the high country and spend a little bit more time in my area, it's really struck me how low the stream flows are, how much even sort of the highest elevation forests are starting to look different than they did just a few years ago. And so I've been thinking a lot about some of those issues that Director Schwartz brought up at the end of her report as well. Our Basin Roundtable met in July. There's a lot of work going on right now. Lots of discussions about Colorado River matters, lots of discussions about the Basin Implementation Plan. There's a work group of the roundtable that has been helping the consultants continue to advance the Basin Implementation Plan work. And we had a leadership transition on our roundtable, so really wanted to thank Mike Preston for his long service as the chair of the roundtable, and to welcome Ed Tolan as our new chair and leader of the roundtable. We had a lot of discussion about the Water Supply Reserve Fund requests that were coming in. The roundtable is trying to be really careful about how we're managing the funding. But as you'll see later today, we had a really great group of projects come in for funding. Stream management planning work is still advancing in the Upper San Juan, the Mancos, and the San Miguel basins. There's a big meeting on the Mancos later this week that I'm looking forward to attending. And then I wanted to just thank the staff from the in-stream flow program for the hard work. I don't know if you all caught in the AG's report, but both Himes Creek and Disappointment Creek were decreed since we last met. Those were both in-stream flows that warranted quite a bit of discussion at the board level, and just wanted to thank the federal agencies, the United States Forest Service, the BLM, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, our local water users in Dolores County for all of the good discussion that went behind getting those two in-stream flows decreed. The only final reflection that I'm having is that as we think about the future of our state, I've been thinking a lot about my hometown in the Plumas National Forest, which is part of that North Complex fire, and, you know, talking to my friends from college in the Bay Area that can't take their children outside. So let's be serious, let's be bold about this work, and I will end my report with that. And if there are no questions, we can move into the Gunnison Basin.
I do have some slides here, but thank you, Madam Chair. I heard Director Felt refer to the year as a roller coaster. Well, it's certainly been a roller coaster in the Uncompahgre this year. We experienced an April hole early on, and I had thought in the past that this was a result of no low snow, which we certainly had last year, but it's more a reflection of the weather through the spring. And this spring it was cold, and we did experience that April hole. And I think it took us a long time to recognize that we weren't gonna, we went into the season looking at an average or normal snowpack, but it took us a long time to recognize that we were not going to get the runoff out of that snowpack that we thought we would. And I think it's several things contributed to that. One of which, though, was we went into the winter season with a dry situation, and it took a lot of our snowpack to replenish that right at the snow level. And of course, then we've experienced a dry, hot summer. Believe me, I'll be happy to shut the system down this year. It's been pretty trying here. Along those lines, I did want to thank the folks at the Bureau of Reclamation. We were able to put a deal together for my association to purchase some water from Ridgeway. We purchased 5,000 acre feet for $4.10, and it certainly helped augment our stories there, and of course our exchange credits that we gained from supplying the domestic suppliers with Gunnison water. This first slide, I wanted to remind everybody that a little over a year ago, the state of Colorado was in no drought anywhere, which my understanding, that was one of the few times that has occurred. Vivian, if you could advance that, I have the current drought monitor for hot off the press this morning, and basically the entire state is now in some form of drought or another. In the interest of time, I might just continue as she pulls that next slide up. I did want to give a shout out to Anna Moss. She assisted the LaRue Creek Reservoir grant application. It had been approved by by us and and of course the Gunnison Basin Roundtable, but the bid prices come in significantly lower than thought, and there's actually 3 reservoirs that need some work on their outlet works, and that was the reason for that consent agenda item there, to get the board to bless that, and we can move ahead with all those all 3 reservoirs work. And at a minimum, we're gonna save the contractor's mobilization. I noticed that she's got it up now, and that's the current situation in the state. And I've watched it all summer, all spring, and all summer, and it just continues to grow. Gunnison Basin Roundtable has a meeting scheduled for this coming Monday. Tomorrow morning, we're going to, a subcommittee of the BIP committee will meet, and we're putting together what I think is a great list of projects to move forward in the Gunnison Basin. One of the members of my board and a local rancher, fourth generation rancher, was drafted to work on Kevin Rain's water speculation work group. And Kevin, I'll tell you, I think he'll certainly enjoy Darius Jutton being a part of that committee. Looking at the North Fork, Fire Mountain has ceased irrigation operations. That's the canal company that services that area. Paonia Reservoir is empty, or at least empty of water, as you can visualize the sludge that's built up over there this year. We had my association had a change it to the Uncompahgre here. My association had a call on the Uncompahgre most of the summer. We put a call on in April. It wasn't administered till middle of June, and currently that call is off on the Uncompahgre. A couple other notes in the Uncompahgre. Our consultant for the Ramshorn Reservoir has published his report. We will continue to work to make that happen. I think back of how operations would have been affected this year if we'd have had a Ramshorn in the process. The idea with Ramshorn is to place a dam on Cow Creek and transfer that water into Ridgeway and supplement our ability to function there. Would take the diurnal flows off of Cow Creek and place them in Ridgeway Reservoir, and it would have been a significantly different year if that infrastructure was in place. One item that's on the Gunnison BIP list of projects is forest mapping in the zones of concern. This all goes to our watershed health, as Director Brody talked about their efforts in the South Platte Basin. It's my understanding that the Forest Service really can't move ahead with mitigation type projects until this mapping is completed. I know that we have Upper Gunnison on board. Montrose County definitely will support this, and my organization, the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association, will also. Montrose County has proven to be a very good friend of the water business in this valley. Over the last few years, they've been purchasing pipe for our laterals, which are essentially the borrow ditch on some of our county roads, and they purchase the pipe and we install it. This does several things. It keeps us off the roads maintaining those laterals, but it also eliminates safety concerns with people running off the county roads into our irrigation laterals. I spent 4 sessions with the Sonora Institute and their Growing Water Smart. This was a group of members of our Land and Water Committee, which we have worked the last year or so putting together. We attended their workshops on growing water smart. I'm excited. It was what we needed to further bring that committee together, and we have some work tasks lined out of that, those discussions to complete in the near future. Vivian, if you could pull up that last slide, I'd appreciate it. That last slide, I don't know if everyone recognized my backside on the cover of Headwaters Magazine's latest publication, but that was a picture of me standing on the county road underneath our twin flumes on the M&D Canal south and west here of Montrose. Personal note, I spent Labor Day weekend in Hermosa Valley and Park. I feel it's very aptly named for those of you that don't know the translation of Hermosa into English. It is beautiful, and it certainly is the beautiful spot in Director Hopkins Basin. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves there. With my new toy, and at 68 years old with my wife, we're still able to spike camp, if you will, and certainly enjoyed our time there. One thing I'd comment on is, and I really don't have a good frame of reference for this because I didn't have an outfit that would take me here, but the Colorado outdoors have certainly seen an explosion in use, and I understand there's been a 40% increase in the use of our mountains this year, and I can attest that many of the four-wheel drive roads have a large quantity of bug dust you can see for miles when you're about to meet somebody up from the dust plume. And I would not discourage anybody from going up and enjoying it, but we're definitely loving it to death. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Are there any questions? Seeing none, that concludes our Basin Director's reports. It is 10:21. Let's take a 15-minute break and be back at, let's say, 10:35. All right, it is 10:35, so let's come back from break and move to agenda item 17.
And thank you so much, Director Hawkins. I'm waiting for the slides to come up here.
Thanks, Russ.
Well, maybe if just in the interest of time, I can kind of riff here a little bit and they'll come up when they do. Russ Sands, CWCB staff, Section Chief for Water Supply Planning, for the record. We wanted to give you a little bit of an update on where we're at with the BIP and water plan update status. And so I just have a few slides, and then I'm actually going to share my time with Megan Holcomb on our team to kind of give you a little bit of a drought update. So what I wanted to kind of first walk through is just a little bit of the status of where we're at. As you know, we are kind of released the technical update, the analysis and technical update to the Colorado Water Plan in 2019. That's really the backbone, a lot of the analysis that's going into the BIP updates and then the water plan. The BIP updates are underway and scheduled to be completed in 2021, and the water plan is scheduled to be completed in 2022. The basins have been working very hard, as many of you have referenced. I'm just eternally appreciative to all the great work and volunteer work that's gone in there. Of course, we talked to you last time about really trying to make a concerted effort to be flexible and just recognize some of those challenges that basins are having with just having to struggle with many things, not the least of all to mention pandemic and fire and drought. I'm happy to say that as of today, all the basins have completed their work plans, their BIP work plans, and they are now kind of moving forward with some of the analysis. To date, they've been focused a lot on projects and really getting better project data. That's an effort they will continue to work on over the next year. A lot of the basins have gone to some pretty great lengths to really try to be even more inclusive of more people in their basin. I think we've heard a lot about this probably from every basin, but certainly the Arkansas, the Yampa White Green, and the Gunnison have really just made a concerted effort to try to be more and more inclusive and reach a lot of people. So there's been a lot of focus there too. Now they're really kind of diving more into the analysis and technical update and just thinking about any additions they can make to improve data and kind of considering that modeling and any implications and what that means for the BIP update. So that's where we're at with the basins. I'm still not seeing slides. If it's just me, let me know, but I will just continue to go. I can tell you, so the next thing I wanted to highlight for you is just where we're at with the water plan. So with the water plan update, we are similarly working on a water plan work plan. And that's something that we've been really working hard on as a part of staff. So staff have been diving into kind of just thinking about what that means. We had a kickoff meeting back in April. We've really been building upon that with several meetings with staff. And it's really helped kind of evolve our thinking, and we're very hopeful. Sorry, you can hear my dog there. We're very hopeful that we can kind of release some more details about what the kind of next phases look like and have that up on our website starting next week. So I will just walk you through what those kind of phases are. So as we look out between now and 2022, when we kind of envision the kind of end of 2022, when we see the water plan update kind of being released, we see 3 clear tranches of effort, or 3 phases. So we are now in kind of this first phase, which is really kind of focused on staff really internalizing, kind of going through, looking where there are areas for update and trying to make some concerted and targeted outreach efforts with stakeholders. And so we are going to look at what kind of public events and kind of map out what that might look like over the next year in those kind of main areas that we had listening sessions kind of centered around. So for agriculture, municipal, environments, and forest health as well. Then next, that will kind of wrap up around the June timeframe of 2021. And then we would like to kind of come back to the board at the July board meeting with an update of kind of what we've been hearing throughout the year and what we've been thinking. And that will really kick off the next phase of work. So that phase 2 is really centered more on how we engage the board and kind of really actually actively drafting the water plan update. It's also the time that we would kind of be working to engage with the legislature as well as part of our requirements to report out on major water plan changes to them. And then that would carry us through around that kind of March, April timeframe where we kick off that last piece, that last phase of work, which is really releasing a draft document for public comment as we've done in the past. And so that's where we're at with the plans. I will pause real quick just to ask, I still cannot see slides. Is anybody else seeing these?
Russ, we're having trouble pulling them up.
Perfect.
There are technical issues, so keep on keeping on.
Okay, so I am going to, I'm trying to just mentally recall. I don't think I had anything else up in my section, but here I've got a quick peek. Oh, I did, yeah, last thing, and then I will transition over to Megan Holcomb, and hopefully her slides will be up because I think hers are more graphic than mine in terms of showing you a few slides. But I did want to say that one of the primary ways, obviously we're all adjusting to this new Zoom environment, and we're really trying to think and have taken to heart a lot of the comments that we've got of just how can we be more collaborative, more inclusive. and how can we do that in a smart way that doesn't overly tax resources. So we have invested in a new website tool that's really seamless with our website, but it's an engagement tool that allows a lot of ability to do surveys or take public comment. You guys actually have seen this because we did our first rollout of it with the demand management work plan, and you saw that. Perfect, here come the slides. And you saw that in terms of how that worked. That's just one facet. There's actually several tools that are baked in there that we can utilize. Perfect, thank you so much for bringing this up. So this is kind of a snapshot of what the page looks like, and in the coming week, we hope to actually, and coming few weeks, flesh this out with a little bit more detail on just the water plan update and have some of these details around phases, or really have some ability for people to highlight their stories about the water plan, what the water plan's meant to them, realizing that this November, we're going to be at our next board meeting celebrating the 5-year anniversary of the water plan. So that's what's on deck for us, and I will pivot to Megan Holcomb on our team as she is actually using this engagement tool for some of our drought outreach efforts.
Hi everyone. So you can see these, Russ? I cannot see what's happening.
I can see them now.
Okay.
It's, so we can click to the next slide, Vivian.
Oh, well, I think Vivian logged off, so I am sharing my screen.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah. I just took over. So if she comes back on, I can stop sharing, but we'll just do that after, since I only have 4 slides, but they are graphical here. So for the record, Megan Holcomb, CWCB staff. Thanks for teeing up those updates, Russ. So I want to just jump into sharing a creative experiment that the Agriculture Impact Task Force dreamed up. And just a quick reminder that the Ag Impact Task Force is a working group that was activated by the state's drought plan on June 22nd by Governor Polis. And so we have about 30 participants from around the state representing Department of Ag, CSU, State Land Board, and numerous growers associations and coalitions, as well as federal agencies such as BLM, Department of Ag, Farm Service, Forest Service, etc. So on September 10th, we had a joint press release that went out to formally announce what you see here, which is the state's drought virtual tour. This project is in lieu of the widely valued 2018 in-person Southwestern drought tour, which I recall a few of you attending. This public engagement project seeks feedback from really any citizens on how they have been impacted by the 2020 drought season. So we came up with this faced with the challenge of traveling and touring in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and the CWCB, Department of Ag, and then the CSU Water Center are co-leading this work, along with a second component to this virtual drought tour project, which is one-on-one interviews with ag producers around the state. And those interviews are being led and recorded as just simple phone, video, or audio clips by the Ag Task Force representatives themselves, because those folks are already distributed around the state and in contact with producers locally. So basically, for maximum COVID responsibility, this virtual approach limits new exposure, non-local exposure, and distance traveled from state staff, while allowing still a broad range of experiences to be captured in a final drought report. So the primary audience for this project will essentially be the 3 drought task force teams. That's the drought task force, the Ag Impact Task Force, and the Water Availability Task Force, all which are a mouthful, along with state legislatures, and then of course yourself, the board. So the vision for the final product is admittedly still under works, but it's going to be a multimedia report online of the 2020 drought season, and these video clips and stories will be embedded throughout a broader narrative to add direct experience and perspective from the field. So my big ask from the board today is if you have a specific story thread from your basin you'd like to elevate for this multimedia report, I'd love to connect with you. This could be in the form of just a video chat that I set up and record with a stakeholder in your region, or even a selfie video that, just like Robert Cicada did from his tractor, to record conditions in his reporting. So it could also just be a short conversation that you record with your neighbor. So there's lots of options, and it's allowed some new creativity on how we do reporting and It was just stolen from me. Thank you, Vivian. Awesome. I just have my screens moved around for 1 second, so let me get back here. Okay, so you can actually flip to the next slide, Vivian, after the drought tour. Perfect. So you've seen this map many times now, but as far as drought conditions updates, I can be brief since you all are deeply tuned in. But what you're seeing here is an update from this morning for the U.S. Drought Monitor, along with an animation of the past 6 weeks for conditions across the U.S. And each week's monitor is actually a retroactive account of conditions. So we did see this morning some 3 minor improvement areas from last week's winter storm. And while it was an incredibly beneficial event, the last few months have been so hot and dry that it's definitely not our reality that one good storm can make up a year's worth of deficits. But as of August 25th, the full state, 100% of the state, is covered in abnormally dry conditions, and that is D0 to the D4 drought categories. We do have exceptional, that's D4 category drought holding in Kiowa County, and 50% of the state is experiencing D3 drought that you can see there. There's 37% of the state that's under severe D2 drought. And we do still have some D1 hanging out as well. So an important heads up for this board is that the USDA National Drought Disaster designations now cover 59 of 64 Colorado counties. The drought plan is currently activated for only 40 counties. So the Drought Task Force, which met this Tuesday, is recommending an expansion of the state plan by the governor to activate an additional 19 counties. And that will likely be in effect by next Monday. That activation primarily affects eligibility for CWCB emergency funds. You can go to the next slide, Vivian. It will look very similar, but when that slide comes up, you'll see the same animation for the country, as well as a map from August 26th that uses the same drought monitor categories and colors to map soil moisture conditions in the top 10 centimeters. I don't know, can you advance the slides, please? Let's see. If that comes up, I wasn't able to add it here, but the map that you will see, hopefully, from August 26th did significantly improve after last week's snow, and I think it'll be interesting to monitor how quickly soil moisture deficits from that top 10 centimeter monitoring are actually set back to drought categories over the next few weeks after somewhat of a statewide wetting storm. So the Climate Prediction Center, that's through NOAA, has 3-month outlooks that do continue to show extremely high confidence for above average temperatures September through November. So the highest confidence for the country is over the Four Corners region, and so essentially what we're going to see is a continuing of a very hot 2020. There's a summary of, let's see, oh, next slide, please. So what you see here is a summary of mean temperatures for the month of August only. When I first saw this data, I was curious how much of that red handprint covered the Colorado River Basin. So the Colorado Climate Center was able to do a quick analysis and found that 93% of the area within the full Colorado River Basin and 95% of the area just within the state of Colorado Basin are experiencing or have experienced record temperatures for August. So that's just an interesting footprint of where we've been feeling this heat in the country. If you can go to the next slide, which is a map of global climate trends. And this won't be surprising to anyone, but 2020 is likely to end up the hottest year ever recorded globally, and that's soon to pass the 2016 record. Oh yeah, there's that. Colorado has seen record temperatures all spring and summer, along with no above average precipitation for this entire water year. So these extreme temperatures are particularly remarkable this year because El Nino conditions have been in a neutral pattern for 2020, which is completely unlike 2016, the current hottest year on record. 2016 had a very strong El Nino event in the tropical Pacific, which boosted global temperatures worldwide. And there's a number of extreme heat events that have characterized the first 6 months of this year, particularly extreme heat in Siberia, where that region has experienced around 8 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial period. And that's, it's arguably one of the most remarkable temperature events globally that we've experienced this year. So perhaps an aspect of my job is somehow to one-up folks on the depressing news category. And I think my take-home message today is that it's not panic and alarm at all. It's honestly just, these maps are just confirmation that we are seeing both globally and locally climate conditions that we predicted to see. This heat is not going anywhere. So regardless of erratic precipitation trends, whether this year, next year, or just the following decade, we can basically assume that our ecosystems will continue to experience rapid changes just from temperature stress alone. And we all know that the same water we used to irrigate in years past will not result in the same crop health with much higher temperatures. So sorry to end on that note, but that is the reality that we are facing in this very interesting year. So thanks all.
Thank you, Megan and Russ. I'm now looking to see if anybody has raised a hand to ask any questions. Director Schwartz. And just a reminder, please put it in the chat. I won't always see the hand wave.
No, my apology. I couldn't get it to change to everyone or to you, so my apology. No, I just think that this is very, very telling, and it's not going to change. And we know that the water plan anticipated temperatures and shortages, but what I suspect is that we're seeing an acceleration and of what our projections were. So question being, to what extent are we willing to incorporate we're sitting here at a very critical moment in time. And how are we willing to really embrace and demonstrate leadership on these issues going forward, but to the extent that we're seeing how well will the water plan then adapt and reflect the information that we're seeing. So Russ, Megan.
And Megan, I'll pivot to you if you have additional thoughts here too. A great question, Director Schwartz. I think this is something that Megan has highlighted a lot in just thinking about the 5 scenarios that we have in the water plan. And of course, in the latter 2, those final 2 and hot and dry included, we have temperatures that are, showing up to a 4.2 degree Fahrenheit increase by 2050. Accelerated or not, in the meantime, I think this certainly at least indicates that we should be looking at those upper bound scenarios potentially in terms of how we might be planning. Certainly would be remiss not to consider them. In the long term, I think what Megan has wisely highlighted is that the nature of scenario planning is that we revisit these scenarios. We have we talked about the scenarios where we have climate change. We also have some scenarios that don't have climate change. In our business as usual, we're not really showing a temperature increase, but we're still seeing variant hydrologies, but we're not really considering those upper bounds. So knowing that our process to develop those 5 scenarios took years and that it was an iterative process with IBCC and the roundtables, that's certainly something that we're considering to start those conversations again. By the nature of timing and how we model, those probably will be things that end up as recommendations in the water plan update for the next round, but it's certainly something that's on our radar. And Megan, I don't know if you have something to add.
Yeah, I think that was a great summary of our conversations just around scenarios and making sure that, the scenarios that the IBCC initially developed were initiated back in 2011-ish. And those conversations, and those, collaborative visions for different scenarios have been integrated into planning over time. And so we don't want to, miss another 10-year chunk where we don't add new scenarios or reconsider some of the ones that we do have.
So just as a follow-up, I think that we're seeing that different parts of the state are being impacted differently or uniquely. And I think that the western part of the state is, and southern part of the state we're just getting hammered. And there are, I don't know if you saw the Washington Post article, but there are unique hotspots where temperatures are rising in this kind of western part of Colorado and eastern Utah faster than many other places. So if we were able to maybe take a look at the state and where temperatures are and look at the rate of temperature increase and then apply that. But to be very active in terms of our interpretation, it's not a one size fits all. We are seeing different patterns in different areas. So maybe making sure the BIP update has the ability to incorporate some of this real-time data would be my recommendation.
I'll just add one more thing before we move on, which is a reminder that at the end of this month, the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction roadmap is due to come out for public comment. And this is a big statewide effort and a push from the governor to really quantify emissions in different sectors of Colorado's economies. And I anticipate there will be lots of opportunities to connect recommendations or actions in the water plan or in the Colorado resiliency framework to a lot of the efforts and potential legislation around moving forward with that roadmap and reducing emissions in our sectors, economy sectors. So just a reminder.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Megan and Russ, for the update. We can now move on to agenda item 18, WSRF criteria and guidelines.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. Russ Sands, again, for the record. Based on our finance committee meeting, the direction was that I try to kind of refine these slides and reduce them where I can. And I have done that. So you'll see a similar presentation, slightly different, but I think there was a desire to at least highlight kind of the high points that we discussed. And then this will end with a staff recommendation for the board's consideration. Next slide, Vivian. There we go. So the WSRF criterion guidelines last changed in 2006, and we are seeing that there are some immediate update needs. The rules for establishing the guidelines, which really fall to the board in consultation with IBCC, were set in Senate Bill 06179, and we have continued to just kind of interpret establishing as with any updates to coordinate between IBCC and the board. So that's generally come in the format of 3 or more IBCC members and 3 or more board members, just additionally or originally vetting any concepts for changing or updating the criteria and guidelines. That group hadn't been convened in some time, but back in December of 2019, we said, maybe it's time to start to revisit these things. We understand it's probably going to be a long haul. We're going to have multiple meetings because there's some big items that are on the table potentially over the years that have come up. However, some of the initial feedback we got out of that meeting was really maybe a little more simple in nature, of just to initially, it might be nice just to clarify the language, to streamline things a bit, and really to take the opportunity to get additional feedback from a broader range of stakeholders. Given the kind of the impacts of pandemic, workload, budget impacts, and really a desire, I think, from the CWCB, this board and staff included, and the basins, really to just continue to streamline and be smarter about how we work. We reconvened that group of 3 IBCC members and 3 board members to discuss some changes that we kind of saw as low-hanging fruit. And that really just was kind of hitting on the head. There's some language in the criterion guidelines that could just be cleaned up to add less confusion. And of course, cleaning up the language means that we get less questions and there's less back and forth with the roundtables, which saves everybody time, from the applicant to the volunteer board members at the roundtable level and to staff. That we really are seeing that WSRF, unlike water plan grants, just have disproportionately smaller review time, and that manifests in a few ways in terms of issues. It can cause delays for getting under contract on the back end of projects. And so there's a desire to build in some more time on the front end to better work with PMs as these projects come in, to flesh out scope of works in advance, so that by the time we get to the end of board meeting and recommendations are moving forward, we can move quicker to contracting, which I see as a point of customer service for just how we better coordinate with roundtables and applicants. Moving the deadline up also just gives us some more time with what we're kind of seeing as spikes maybe in the 2 times a year that WSRF grants are going to for board review. Some of the roundtables, about 3 currently, and others have talked about this, are moving in their efforts to streamline things to just approve all WSRF grants, whether they have a state match component or not, in these windows. And so that puts a kind of disproportionate spike into our work, and that work is really funneled more recently with staffing changes to 1 person. That person previously was Craig Gaboo, who, as Director Mitchell mentioned in her opening comments, has since left the agency. And so for any variety of reasons, adding more time in the deadline is going to be valuable for just us maintaining and really enhancing customer service. And then the last thing is just a change in distribution levels. We have heard, and you're going to hear me talk a little bit more about how the budget is challenged. But as the budget's challenged, we see little or no, likely no WSRF dollars from SevTax coming in over the next 3 years. But if there is money that's going to come in at all, it would likely be small. And it makes little sense to do this 40-30-30 split over the years. It would be better to just kind of roll those changes into a one-time distribution in September. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And my last note on this slide is just that these are all things that we discussed in more detail. This was recorded. It's uploaded on YouTube with the Finance Committee on Tuesday. So next slide. And as the next slide's queuing up, I'll say I'm not going to talk about the confusing language, but suffice to say there's just a lot of old terminology and language that wasn't clear. And everything is in the packet if anybody wants to see the changes we're making, but they're pretty straightforward. So I'll focus on the other 2 because they're a little bit more, there's a little bit more to it. So when we think about these deadline changes, one substantive conversation that we had during the Finance Committee was that it may make sense to better align the water plan grant deadline with the WSRF grant deadline with the water plan grant deadline. So right now that has changed to a water plan application deadline of December 1st, and that is for the March board meeting. As things sit now, you can see we have a very small window for getting in, receiving, coordinating with applicants and getting things to the board, with the current deadline for WSRF for that same March board meeting being February 1st. So we are proposing to move all the deadlines up for WSRF to give a 3-month window instead of a 1-month window. And that's a little bit of a change than what was originally contemplated. We were thinking maybe 2 months, but I think given some of the staffing changes and input from the Finance Committee, that it makes sense to go with this 3-month window. And it has the benefit of aligning things. So I think it's ultimately less confusing for applicants too. The other change that was discussed at Finance Committee that I will highlight is we do have this kind of somewhat awkward process where water plan grants can come in and at different times than WSRF grants. And when those are joint applications effectively, when the WSRF grant is leveraging a water plan grant, and you will see one of these today. You have that kind of awkwardness of knowing that you're approving one without approving the other. So the other kind of newer recommendation that maybe isn't contemplated in the packet but was discussed at Finance Committee meeting is that for WSRF grants that are a joint water plan, that are leveraging a water plan, that those get added into the criteria guideline, that those need to go together for that March board meeting, and kind of again aligning water plan and WSRF grants, which gives the board the benefit of just being able to see everything at once, and I think ultimately gives the applicants just more certainty of what's happening. And I will be clear here, though, that while this may look like a shift, what practically happens is that when one gets approved and it's waiting on the other, nothing is going to contracting. So it's kind of sitting in this limbo state until the second grant is approved. So the end effect to the applicant is not necessarily different. It's just a timing shift, if anything. So next slide, please. Just to build on this, I did want to acknowledge that given the feedback, we did do a survey. We just had it open for a couple of weeks. We heard from 16 participants, and I think we got a lot of good kind of nuggets in there for future planning, just some what's working well, what's not working. A lot of good feedback that things were working well. Specifically, I think some good kudos for staff, and we'd like to maintain that. So some of these changes are really about making sure we can still provide a high level of customer service. With regards to the deadline change, we asked kind of a broad question of if it were moved up, would there be a concern? And 13 of 16, so that's 81%, had little or no concern over that deadline change. There were 3 that had, kind of some concern, but I think it was phrased as some concern, but I get it, and then one that just said concerned, I want to know more. So 15 of 16 had, either some level of concern but understood, or no concern at all. So we really just had one, and I will flag that the one we had, actually we got input in the same basin on kind of opposite extremes of concern and no concern, and both had done a sizable number of WSRF grants. So in general, obviously this is just a spot sample and I don't want to oversell it, but based on the snapshot we got, it seems like moving the deadline up doesn't have major impacts, at least that we're hearing about. And when we floated a deadline change to this kind of working committee with IVCC and board members, we got kind of unanimous support for that as well. So I'm not seeing things, but of course we will always work to be adaptive and kind of try to work with applicants should issues arise. Next slide. So on this distribution, I wanted to talk about a few things here. One is going to be a spot of good news, but again, it doesn't make much sense to kind of stick to this 40-30-30 split across the years. We honestly believe it's probably easier and better for roundtables to manage their money earlier in the year and again have that certainty of what's coming in. Obviously this year we didn't have anything coming in, but if we were to have money, we would propose that we make that 100% deposited on September 1st. That originally in the language in the criterion guidelines, now that first 40% deposit actually comes on July 1, and the money is never truly there. So it's kind of odd. It creates a lot of back and forth of did the money get deposited? And in many cases, it may take a full month or more before that could happen. So putting it at September 1st sets reasonable expectations, allows staff time to make that change, and reduces confusion as well. So big question, why am I talking about distributions if we're making it clear that we are not going to have money? Well, there is one bright spot. If you could click, Vivian. We do have some carryover dollars. We have $2 million in carryover dollars from last year. This was money that initially was going to go to backfill WSRF. At the time, tax came in higher than we thought, so we held that money, and there was some of the confusion around just budget and wanting the dust to settle and wanting to get to Finance Committee before we made this announcement, just so we had crystal clear transparency with what we're doing. We waited till now to bring this up, but this does have a nice benefit. I think 1 or 2 more clicks, maybe just one, Vivian. Yeah, so doing the split, the way we do this $2 million of carryover dollars, applying that is going to allow us to put about $80,000 into each basin account. I think that that's going to be hopefully a much appreciated contribution. This money was originally coming from construction fund. Obviously, you all heard, and again, Finance Committee can be referenced online. That money will not be there likely to do this kind of thing in the foreseeable future. So it's certainly not any kind of would fall well short of calling any kind of a bailout or future opportunity. This may be the last distribution that we could put into accounts for several years, knowing that subtax is just not likely to be there. So we'll get that 80,000 put into Basin accounts as soon as we can, if this is all approved by the board today. For the statewide account, that 64%, again, that 36-64 split in the criterion guidelines, puts 1.28 million in the statewide account. And that allows us, and we're going to talk more about this in a little bit, but that allows us to, given the 3-year spending plan that we have with CWCB and DNR, to kind of stretch money, knowing that we're not going to get more, to stretch that out, allows us to take, to increase the statewide balance, and then dividing it up over 3 years, apply about $2.3 million per year to WSRF statewide matches. That is approximately equal to the median over the last 4 years and just shy of what was funded last year. And we're going to talk about that in more detail, so I won't belabor it now. Next slide. So with that said, staff recommends approval of the WSRF criterion guideline updates that are noted in the memo, with these 2 added deadline changes that were highlighted in this presentation and at Finance Committee, those being to move from a 2-month, moving the deadline up 2 months to 3 months, and then making a statement in there about aligning water plan grants that have a WSRF component to go at the same time for that March meeting, to align the water plan deadline with the WSRF deadline.
Thank you, Russ. Is there any discussion or questions for Russ on this agenda item? Seeing none, we do have a staff recommendation in front of us. Director Brody.
I just wanted to move approval of the staff recommendation regarding item 18 with the 2 additional deadline changes that were noted in the presentation.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Brody to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 18 with the 2 additional changes, seconded by Director Felt. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. If you're opposed, let me know in the chat or by raising your hand. Seeing none, the motion is approved. Let's move on to item 19, WSRF grant applications, and start on 19A.
Thank you so much. And again, Russ Hands for the record. And this time you will see me splitting things up with Kat Weissmiller on my team, who I am eternally grateful for, as she is, with some support from Ben Wade and other staff, helping to present on the WSRF grants that you want, that Craig would have previously presented on, that will be coming up. We did a little bit of a dry run just running through those, and in thinking about questions that might come up, it kind of illuminated some things for us that I felt, and in talking with Deputy Director Lauren Riss, felt that we'd be a bit remiss not to just highlight for the board first. Knowing that we've done a dry run here, I'm confident that we'll get through in our time, so this is not going to extend time, but I think it's important for you to hear. So if you can click on the next slide, please. So, and Vivian, these are bullets we'll click in one at a time, so I'm gonna ask you to click. But first bullet here, just talking about the WSRF state match totals, we have this 3-year spending plan, and when we add those carryover dollars as presented in the previous slides and previous presentation, that gives us about $2.3 million per year for the next 3 years. As you've seen in your board packet totals for this September, for this board meeting, and the grants that you're about to see and provide approval or comments on, that totals about $1.8 million. And so what I wanted to highlight for you, because I think it's important for you all just to have that, for us to be transparent and the board be clear, but also for the basins to hear and understand the implications, is that that really only leaves a remaining statewide balance for the March board meeting for any additional state match request of 492,000 roughly. So if you click on next slide. So I wanted to provide some perspective here on what that $492,000 balance means. So for reference, the 4-year average March request is 1.3 million. The numbers vary drastically. I'm going to show you a little bit about that in detail here in a second, but the lowest March we ever had was 574,000 in request, and we could be on track for that. We just honestly don't know. We don't know what's going to come in and what's going to hit. We could get something that's bigger. Last year, March request was 1.7 million. So if it were to track with last year, we would be, roughly we'd be able to match roughly 2/3 less of what we could do. Ideally, we would not wait for just to see what happens and have to reject grants. It may be better to message some of this to the roundtables now, and I think pairs well with some of the comments that we've heard, just to be judicious with spending and really engage the roundtables in helping us to that end. Let me just show you a little bit more detail in case it helps with kind of laying this out. One click there, Vivian, please. So this is just a table that shows those numbers in detail. You can see, again, we could be on track for something more like fiscal year 16-17, where we had a very high September and a lower March. Again, the amount we have in balance would be lower than that low. Certainly, we had a very high fiscal year 17-18. The last year maybe is a bit, we can see we're probably not trending that way because we've had such a high September as opposed to a relatively low September match request last year. So there's probably not a lot to read in the tea leaves here, but maybe I'll just break out the data in a different way if that's also helpful. Next slide, please. Just to put these all together in one graph and to add in the current fiscal year. How do we know what the current fiscal year ends up as? Well, it's because we have this $2.3 million kind of annual spend. So we can take the delta of what's coming in and the current grant requests you're about to hear, see what's left over for March by subtracting that from the total that we've allocated for the 3-year spend. So this shows you, I think, and I'm sorry, I know these numbers are somewhat small, but it shows you that when you look at total number of the total dollar amount per year in grant requests, especially if you exclude fiscal year 17-18, we're probably not that much different in terms of the total numbers, but you can just see a huge variation here in what's coming in September or March. So part of framing this up for you is not just to really focus on today, but maybe to allow you guys to think about how we might message these things moving forward now that we do have somewhat of a fixed number from year to year. So next slide, please. So options for consideration, and I will frame up for you now that I think that this is the way to go. This is the track that we're on, is that we probably need to think about keeping March grant request within this $492,000 balance. But there are some other things you can do. I'm going to frame those up for you just so you can think through them. And we did the brain damage, honestly, last night, just crunching some numbers because I think it's important to know what the ramifications would be and get in front of any questions you may have. But next bullet, please. One click. We could have that conversation collectively to say, would we want to alter the 3-year spend to allow more money this year and just wait and see what comes in March and say, we're going to try to meet that, but we'd offer less in the out years. What that effectively does is it just reduces your ability to match throughout the entire year in the next 2 years because we're still dealing with that finite amount. And so in terms of, just having some consistency here, I don't think that would be a staff recommendation. Next bullet. You could cut the grant match request now to reserve more budget in March. Again, I'm going to walk you through why I think that's probably not the greatest option. And the simple answer is that the cuts would be pretty deep. They'd be fairly draconian, and I don't think that they'd be great for applicants. So a 37% match would keep you with 50% of the money left over for March. If you wanted to say, let's put 50 in now and keep 50 for later. So that would leave you a $1.2 million balance instead of that $492,000. If you wanted to say we're going to cut all the grants by 50%, it keeps 60% in statewide. You know, to allow you a little bit more buffer in there, but it's just giving you some options here just to kind of run the numbers. Next bullet. If you did a 67% cut to the match, that keeps enough money in there to fund the same funding levels as last March. So that's really the highlight point here, is that there's no way you could really, I think we could honestly, responsibly and fairly reach those levels that we reached last year. You'd have to make some pretty deep cuts with the grants you're about to see, and that would have unknown impacts to applicants pretty late in the game. These projects have been in the hopper for a long time, and it may just render the projects not viable. So our recommendation, one more click, Vivian. I guess one more after that, thank you, is just to keep these March requests within that 492,000 balance. And really, I think to message to the roundtables now that we're each of the 9 roundtables to have a request, that they probably need to keep that request within kind of $54,000 per basin of match request. One thing you could think about is that we could, in future years, knowing that we're going to have this same $2.3 million kind of cap over the next 2 years, we could get in front of this better and message next year. If you wanted to say split it equally from September to March, you could say we're going to basins, hey, you're going to be allotted this amount. I've got it actually in my notes here, but I'm not looking at it on my own slide. So but I think it's something roughly like something shy of $200,000, if I recall, for each basin that you could kind of come up with. So those are in the notes here, but at least initially, this seems like the path to go, to say we're going to keep it within this balance. I just wanted to tee this up for you so that you kind of have that full transparency as you're going in and seeing these grants, that we are making a pretty big funding requirement. There's not additional money that looks like it's going to be brought to be able to backfill funds in the future. And I think that this just really highlights some of the stuff you heard in the director's comments, and also in our finance committee meeting, that the budget's tight. And I think being able to maybe message this and kind of give somewhat of a spending guidance to the roundtables, quite honestly, is some of the feedback that we heard. And Director Hawkins mentioned it in some of her comments too, but her basin, I remember specifically saying, like, we need some guidance here. So I think, although painful, this at least gives a frame of reference for roundtables if we wanted to message this, and that's something certainly that staff could do. So we can pause for questions, Director Hawkins, if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm happy to tee things up to Kat Weissmiller on our team.
Thank you, Russ. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Russ, I want to put one other idea in the staff's brains as we think about this. I do have a question about whether we should move to a once annual review of WSRF funds, given the limitations. And would just ask that at the next meeting, if staff could think about that and advise us on that, so we can continue to help manage this with our roundtables.
Absolutely, good thought.
All right, I think we can proceed, and thank you, Russ. Oh, here we go. Director Felt.
Don't want to raise anything controversial, but I'm just curious, Russ, historically, let's see, how can I say this? Has it always just been the policy that the funds be distributed equally amongst the basins without regard to, different factors that you could look at? Size, geographic area, population, things like that. And I'm not pushing for that, but I'm just curious if that conversation has happened or has happened recently.
No, it has, Director Felt. Great question, and this gets to when I teed up for you that there were some things that were bigger discussions that we knew would take multiple conversations. That certainly is one of them. And there are arguments on both sides. I think Director George has spoken very eloquently around why that may not make sense, because it can be perceived as not causing equity. On the other hand, I know 100% very familiar with some of the comments and some of the folks in the Arkansas specifically who have brought this up quite a bit. There is a bit of, I think, brilliance in just this statewide breakout, because it allows to some extent to have your cake and eat it too. You can distribute money equally, being, just literally equally split across each basin, and then allow basins to come in individually for match requests. And you'll see that play out in the grants that you're about to see, but not every basin will apply, and not every basin will apply for as much. So these are certainly things that we can dig into the future. They're not easy answers, and there's some hard feelings on both sides about how that should play out. Looks like Director Brown maybe has a question as well.
Director Dutton has a question before me, though.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to usurp the process, but I don't wonder if Director Hawkins is having technical difficulties.
Yeah, she just texted she is, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I appreciate, Russ, you thinking through and kind of giving us maybe 4 different options. And I agree with the one that you are recommending and kind of where you've landed, and would just say that, this is, we had a similar conversation at our roundtable level that I think now we're having with the statewide funds, which is that we've always looked at projects as they come into the door. And so, and I know I can speak for, the one that's coming forward from the Rio Grande today, that it's been in the works for quite some time. It was really thought out to implement our SMPs, and it's a great project. Not that I'm biased, but and so I would hate for us to start thinking about, well, how do we cut funding for projects to then hold money for projects that aren't even maybe in the works yet, or that we don't even know are coming down the pipeline, when we do have a suite of really great projects in front of us. And I know that it adds maybe more pressure on staff, but that's, I think, what the board really, we rely on you to do the vetting and bringing these projects to us and say, yeah, we agree. We feel that these are great projects, and they're worth funding, and they fit with our goals. And so anyway, I'd hate for us to pull back, and when all these folks have worked so hard to put together really thoughtful and good ideas, when we don't know what's coming, but we do have these in front of us. So I support your recommendation for the path forward here.
Thank you, Director Dutton. Director Brown?
Thank you. I support what Heather said. I just want, to put a plug in for the fact that obviously we didn't know COVID was coming. And so as we go through these grants, and I think we've done a good job also chatting with the roundtable chairs and roundtable members about just the need for making sure that when you bring forward a project and when you support a project, that it really is, the best project, and that everybody's been very diligent about how much money to grant out, because while I completely agree that the projects that have done a lot of work to be here where they are now, hate to see projects not be able to be funded just because they didn't happen to get their timing right when COVID hit. So I just want to make sure that, not make sure, because I think staff does a great job of that, but just remind, I guess, anyone that's listening, and remind us as we participate in our Basin roundtables and with other project proponents to, just that we have limited amounts of money, and we really should be making sure that we're spending it in the best way possible as we go forward. And then I just can't help myself but to comment to Director Felt. When you look at the fund distribution of the basins and what they have received by the statewide account balances, I think it's really important to see that a basin like the Arkansas that has received a lot of money from the statewide in comparison to some of the smaller, less populated areas, you know, please keep that in mind. Just because we don't spend all our money or we're not as big or whatever, we do utilize our money, and certainly just want to bring attention to the lack of equity in the statewide funds, which has never bothered me, but I think supports the fact that equity amongst the basin funds is really appropriate, in my opinion. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Brown. Because my chat got cut off when I got kicked off, I just want to double check that no one else raised their hand while I was out. All right, then Russ, I think we can move along.
Perfect. Then I will immediately transition into introducing Kat Weissmiller. Before I do that, I want to thank her again for taking over these presentations, and to say that in honor of some of the feedback from the board and Director Hawkins specifically at our last board meeting, we are kind of mixing up the format a little bit here, and we'll be presenting these somewhat more similar to how we do water plan grants. Kat will be presenting these in more of a block format by basin, which will just kind of limit the time that the board has to go back and forth with approving. And so with that, I will turn things over to Kat.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Kat Weissmiller, Deputy Section Chief of Water Supply Planning, for the record. Today I'll be presenting 15 WSRF grant applications, agenda items 19A through O. As Russ noted, though I'm presenting these items, they were prepared by Craig Gaboot, who retired effective Monday. So I will have somewhat limited ability to answer background questions, but I'll do my best, and Russ and Ben Wade have agreed to assist me if needed. Next slide, please. The first application is recommended for approval by the South Platte and Metro Basins. This is agenda item 19A. The applicant and grantee is Nearbo Hydrogeology for the project titled South Platte River Salinity Study Phase 2. The purpose of this application is to assist Nearbo Hydrogeology to convene a stakeholder group, engage a technical team, and begin investigation into natural geologic salinity sources along the South Platte River to investigate how natural salinity inputs may control the background salinity levels in the basin. This project aligns with the basin's BIP goal to maintain the delivery of safe water supplies throughout the basin and maintain water quality. It also supports a critical action highlighted in Chapter 10 of the Water Plan to maintain Colorado's agricultural productivity. The applicant requests $45,000 each from the South Platte and Metro Basins and $90,000 from the statewide account. As this is the only grant put forward by two basins, staff recommends the approval of the full amount requested, $180,000, and I believe Grady O'Brien is on and available for questions on this one.
Thank you, Kat. Are there any questions for Kat? Seeing none, Grady, if you're on and would like to address the board, now is the time to do so, and please introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, sorry. This is Grady O'Brien. There's a big delay there. Grady O'Brien with Nearbo Hydrogeology. Yes, we've, as Kat said, we put together this, revised this proposal quite a bit to try and address a lot of the concerns that have been raised about making sure all the stakeholders were involved in this process and have some input on it. And also to have a technical review board as well that's going to review the technical methods and results and the analyses that are going to be done. And so, and also the technical aspects of it, we're doing it in partnership with Colorado Geological Survey. So we have a technical partner for actually doing the work. So it's a pretty robust process here, and we're looking forward to getting started on this. And we've tried to address a lot of different issues as we've gone through the process here, and I think everybody has been very supportive of where we're at with this application proposal.
Thank you, Grady. Director Yon.
Yeah, thanks, Grady, for being here. And I just wanted to say that both the South Platte Roundtable and Metro Roundtable talked about this a lot, and Grady was open. You know, he did phase 1 of the salinity study and wanted to go into phase 2. And we had some concern within the roundtable, and we brought a lot of partners in. And Grady's been open to having the best study that he can, because salinity is a large problem, especially in the lower basin, and we're just trying to find out exactly where it's from and what's going on in trends. So with that said, you know, there are a lot of partners here: Colorado Corn, the Colorado Geological Survey, Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, the Central Colorado Water Conservancy District, and South Metro Water Supply. And so we've had both municipalities involved, and Grady's been open to advisory type council to oversee this study. So I think it's come full circle, and we've landed on a good spot here. So so I think if there are any other questions, I'm sure Grady can answer them, or if there's anything concerning the roundtable, that I can help answer those too.
Thank you, Director Yon. Are there any other questions here? Seeing none, Kat, are you going to move on to a staff recommendation?
Yeah, staff recommends the approval of the full grant request of $180,000.
Thank you. Director Yon?
Yeah, all right, I guess I'll go ahead. I was seeing if Jessica wanted to jump in. I don't want to take them all. So, but there's a couple Jessica can do. So anyway, I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 19A.
Director Yon has moved staff recommendation on agenda item 19A. It's been seconded by Director Brody. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you object to this, please let me know in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. We can move on.
Thank you. Next slide, please. The next 3 items, B through D, are recommended for approval by the Arkansas Basin Roundtable. I'll present all 3 before presenting the staff recommendation. The first is agenda item 19B. The applicant and grantee is the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District for the project titled Headgate 199 Lining. The purpose of this application is to assist the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District to control selenium and nutrient loading to the Arkansas River by lining approximately 2,500 feet of the existing Catlin Canal adjunct to Headgate 199. This effort will support the Arkansas Basin Roundtable in improving water delivery as called for in the Arkansas Basin Implementation Plan. The applicant requests $18,000 from the Arkansas Basin account and $180,000 from the statewide account. Next slide, please. The next agenda item is 19C. The applicant and grantee is Pueblo County for the project titled Italian and Suburban Lateral Water Improvement Project. The purpose of this application is to assist Pueblo County to convert about 13,000 feet of open ditch to buried pipeline to improve irrigation water delivery to 2,500 acres of irrigated farmland, reduce conveyance losses to 204 shareholders, and to reduce injurious water intrusion into existing residential septic system leach fields and basements. This effort will assist the Arkansas Basin Roundtable to satisfy their basin implementation plan goal of sustaining agriculture. The applicant requests $46,400 from the Arkansas Basin account and $162,900 from the statewide account. Next slide, please. The next agenda item is the final for the Arkansas. It's agenda item 19D. The applicant and grantee is the Round Mountain Water and Sanitation District for the project titled Reservoir Feasibility Study and Design. The purpose of this application is to assist the Round Mountain Water and Sanitation District to conduct a feasibility study and preliminary design for a proposed reservoir site located 1 mile south of West Cliff, Colorado, with the potential of storing 150 acre-feet of water for agricultural and municipal purposes. This effort will help the Arkansas Basin Roundtable develop new storage in the Arkansas Basin for M&I and to increase augmentation supply to meet the Colorado Compact requirements as called for in the Arkansas Basin Implementation Plan. The applicant requests $15,500 from the Arkansas Basin account and $155,000 from the statewide account. As this is the last application for the Arkansas Basin, staff recommend the approval of the full amount for each item under each item B through D.
Thank you, Kat. Are there any questions from the board? Director Felt.
I would move approval of items 19B, C, and D.
Director Felt has moved approval of agenda items or staff recommendation for agenda items 19B, C, and D, seconded by Director Brody. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you're opposed, please let me know in the chat. And this motion is approved. We can move to the next block.
Thank you. The next project is recommended for approval by the Gunnison Basin. This is agenda item 19E. The applicant and grantee is the Cimarron Canal and Reservoir Company for the project titled Fish Creek Reservoir No. 2 Repair and Conservation Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Cimarron Canal and Reservoir Company to rehabilitate Fish Creek No. 2 Reservoir through several infrastructure replacements and improvements to the outlet pipe, intake structure, dam face, and outlet works to address a 2017 zero storage restriction set by the State Engineer's Office. This effort will help the Gunnison Basin Roundtable improve agricultural water supplies to reduce shortages and encourage the beneficial relationship between agricultural, environmental, and recreational water uses. All goals described in their Basin Implementation Plan. The applicant requests $50,000 from the Gunnison Basin account and $88,900 from the statewide account for a total of $138,900. This is the only project for the Gunnison, and staff recommends the full application request be approved.
Thank you, Kat. Are there any questions from the board? Director Anderson.
I move for approval of agenda item 19E.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Director Anderson has moved approval of agenda item 19E. It's been seconded by Director Brody. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you have an objection to this motion, please note it in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. Let's move on to the next block.
Thank you. The next three applications are recommended for approval by the Metro Basin Roundtable. The first item is agenda 19F. The applicant and grantee is the Lookout Mountain Water District for the project titled Lookout Mountain Water District SCADA Implementation Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Lookout Mountain Water District to design and install a SCADA system to automate Upper Beaver Brook Reservoir's release gate operation based on real-time measured flow data and additional user inputs. It will also improve the 96-year-old outlet infrastructure in order to fully utilize this new SCADA system. This effort will support the Metro Roundtable to achieve municipal water conservation, reuse, and efficiency, and will help Colorado meet municipal and industrial water needs as called for in Colorado's water plan. The applicant requests $50,000 from the Metro Basin account and $100,000 from the statewide account. Next slide, please. The next item is agenda item 19G. The applicant and grantee is the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center for the project titled 10-10-10 Water and Climate Program. The purpose of this application is to assist 10-10-10 to conduct original research combining systems maps, stakeholder engagement, and research briefs to enhance approaches to water challenges in Denver and the Front Range. Research materials will in turn be used to facilitate a program devoted to water and climate. This effort will assist the Metro Roundtable to achieve their goals as called for in section 4.1.3 of the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan. Find alternatives to agricultural dry-up, explore alternative transfer methods, and market competitive approaches within agricultural. The applicant requests $45,000 from the Metro account. Next slide, please. The next agenda item, 19H, is the final for the Metro Basin. The applicant and grantee is Water Reuse Colorado for the project titled Direct Potable Reuse, Water Quality Control Division, Stakeholder Process Facilitation. The purpose of this application is to assist Water Reuse Colorado and the Water Quality Control Division to develop Colorado Direct Potable Reuse regulations to enable Colorado communities to fully utilize their reusable supplies. It will initiate a formal 18 to 24 month long stakeholder process to seek input from drinking water providers, wastewater providers, US EPA Region 8, the public, and others. This effort will help the Metro Roundtable maintain leadership in conservation and reuse and implement additional measures to reduce water consumption rates. The applicant requests $50,000 from the Metro Basin account and $49,800 from the statewide account. This is the last application for the Metro Basin. Staff recommends approval of the full amount requested for agenda items F through H. And I believe that Laura Belanger is on and available for questions on this last item, 19H.
Thank you, Kat. First of all, are there any questions for Kat on any of these applications? Seeing none, Laura, do you wish, if you wish to address the board, now is a good time to do it, and please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Director Hawkins, and thank you all very much for your consideration of this request. I'm Laura Belanger. I'm with Western Resource Advocates, but I'm here today representing Water Reuse Colorado. And just to reiterate, this is the final phase of our project to get direct potable reuse water quality regulations in place for Colorado. And I'd like to thank the board and the Basin Roundtables for past support that got us to this place. This is a very collaborative project. We have a lot of partners and supporters, and the project will enable us to hire a professional facilitator to work with the Water Quality Control Division on this final formal stakeholder process that will develop a proposal to go in front of the Water Quality Control Commission to get DPR regulations hopefully in place for Colorado. So, you know, we're really excited about this. We know a lot of utilities are waiting for this, and we think it'll really help with the water plan goal of getting a lot of conservation and reuse in place. So thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Laura? I think a couple of people have signed up, but Director Brody.
I was just going to call your attention. It looked like Director Schwartz wanted to ask a question.
Oh, Director Schwartz.
And thank you. And thank you for your testimony. Just a question on, my understanding is that it would be for research on potable reuse. Is that right for this application? The Water Reuse Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, and thank you, Director Schwartz, for the question. It's not research per se. We've actually just completed a completed research that was multiple year that looked into a lot of the technical background and has a proposed framework for direct potable reuse regs, and so that's pipe to pipe, skipping skipping the water in an environmental barrier or stream first before it's picked back up, like Prairie Waters does that. So this would enable utilities like Castle Rock, for example, is interested in implementing this, so you can skip the stream and they won't have the transit losses. And so what this will do is actually take that research that we've completed already, and we have this sort of proposed framework that we've worked on with stakeholders and with the division on the water quality control division, and it will then take that through, we'll have working groups, final technical groups, and we'll come up with an actual proposal that will go in front of the Water Quality Control Commission for these regulations. And yes, it is potable, absolutely. It's to enable this the pipe to pipe.
So just as a follow-up, we're doing this in conjunction with gray water systems as well. I mean, this is, we're really trying to maximize all of our approaches at the same time, and you're supporting that too, along with your work?
Absolutely. Yep. So Regulation 84 is the reclaimed water, the purple pipe, the non-potable reuse, and we absolutely are continuing to work with the legislature, CDPHE, as well as water providers to expand how we can use the purple pipe, the non-potable water, because as you said, that's really important, and we've made a lot of advances in recent years, like edible crops, toilet flushing, things like that. Gray water, that regulation is 86, the Water Quality Control Commission Regulation 86, and that was passed, I think, back in 2015. So absolutely, we are continuing to look at this very holistically, and this is one important piece of that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call on you again, Director Brody.
Thank you. So we're seeing 3 very different projects out of the Metro Roundtable this time around, and it's exciting to see the very different and creative uses of the money. And with that, I will move approval of staff recommendation on items 19F through H.
Thank you, Director Felt. All right. Director Brody has moved staff approval on agenda items 19F through H. It's been seconded by Director Felt. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you're opposed to the motion, please let me know in the chat. Seeing none, the motion is approved. Please move on to the next block.
Thank you. The next agenda item, 19I, is recommended for approval by the North Platte Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Owl Mountain Partnership for the project titled Jackson County Water Structure Improvement Project Number 3. The purpose of this application is to assist the Owl Mountain Partnership to install and/or replace a headgate at Willow Creek and to install 3 measuring flumes on the Hanover, Damfino, and Sales ditches. These structures address both agricultural and environmental water needs, providing irrigation water to multiple individuals that irrigate over 600 acres in Jackson County, and creating irrigation-induced wetlands and riparian areas that provide habitat for wildlife species and recreational opportunities. This effort will assist the North Platte Basin Roundtable to achieve its goal to continue to restore, maintain, and modernize critical water infrastructure. The applicant requests $66,219 from the North Platte Basin account. As this is the only project from the North Platte Basin, staff recommends approval of the full amount requested.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Kat? Director Trick.
I don't have a question, just a comment, and just to remind everybody that this project is important for infrastructure in the basin and bringing structures into compliance with the division engineer notices that have been sent out to folks. So we support this in the basin.
Thank you, Director Trick. And we do have the staff recommendation in front of us.
Great. I will go ahead and move to approve staff recommendation on item 19I.
It's been moved by Director Trick to approve staff recommendation on item 19I. It's been seconded by Director Yan. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you are opposed to the motion, please let me know in the chat. Seeing none, the motion is approved. Let's move on to the Rio Grande.
This is agenda item 19J. The application is recommended for approval by the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation for the project titled Conejos River Partnership Project Phase 1. The purpose of this application is to assist the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation to rehabilitate existing diversions and headgates servicing the Sabine School section for Tecitos and Alleges ditches, where aging and inefficient diversion infrastructure is contributing to channel instability and creating high maintenance requirements. This work will enhance aquatic habitat adjacent to the 5 structures through fish barrier removal, offer stream bank stabilization and riparian restoration at each diversion structure, reduce sediment input, and improve water quality. This effort will assist the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable towards their goals in Chapter 3 of the Rio Grande Basin Implementation Plan and assist Colorado in achieving its goals to maintain agricultural viability, as called for in the Colorado Water Plan. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Rio Grande Basin account and $225,000 from the statewide account. This is the only project from the Rio Grande Basin, and staff recommends approval of the full amount requested for agenda item 19J.
Thank you, Kat. Director Dutton.
Thanks, Director Hawkins. I noticed that Daniel Boyce is on, and Daniel is in charge of the restoration project while Emma is on maternity leave. And so if it's appropriate, Director Hawkins, I just wanted to see if Daniel had anything to add.
Thank you, Director Dutton. Daniel, if you'd like to address the board, this is a good time to do it, and please state your name for the record.
Hi everyone, Daniel Boyes with the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this project. It's really exciting for the Restoration Foundation as well as all of the partners involved. As Heather noted earlier, it's really the first project to come out of the Conejos River Stream Management Plan, which is really exciting. You know, as you heard in Kat's description, it has multiple benefits for the Conejos River, everything from irrigation infrastructure improvements and really importantly, aquatic habitat enhancements. And so we're really excited about this project, and we really appreciate CWCB's continued support of these types of multiple benefit projects. And thanks for your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions about it.
Director Schwartz.
Thank you. I got my RN. So thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. And from the application, it was the first phase of 3 phases for the Conejos. And I know there are certain challenges on that drainage, but do you anticipate this level of cost and participation from the state moving forward? And will you be able to implement the other phases? You understand that we have significant challenges moving forward and want to make sure that you're going to make a significant impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think I've been listening in this morning. I know there's a lot of uncertainty and just a lot of, you know, just acknowledgement that the state budget is going to be really thin in the next several years. And I think that we do expect to be able to fund the next phases of this project, not necessarily through WSRF. I think there's a lot that waits to be seen in that realm, but there are a lot of other grant opportunities. We've been successful with the Restore grant program, which is leveraging this project. And there are a lot of other opportunities for funding. And so I think we're confident that we'll see funding, but we also will be respectful and look at what the WSRF and other CWCB grant pools are looking like in the future. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, well, before I call on Director Dutton again, Daniel, it's nice to see you here. Emma is probably one of our most consistent audience members, and so I feel like I have to give her a hearty congratulations. We look forward to seeing pictures of the little one and just hope that she is doing really well right now. Director Dutton.
Thanks, Director Hawkins. And I was texting with Emma just a little while ago, and it sounds like her parents have been here, and just like all moms, her mom has been a lifesaver this first week. So it's good to know she has her work family, and I know she appreciates your sentiments and has awesome family support too. So just really exciting time. I'd like to move staff recommendation on agenda item 19J.
Director Dutton has moved staff recommendation on agenda item 19J. It's been seconded by Director Yan. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you oppose the motion, please let me know in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. We can move on to the next block.
Thank you. This is agenda item 19K. It's recommended for approval by the South Platte Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is Colorado State University for the project titled Sustaining Plains Aquatic Ecosystems Using an Integrated Ecological and Social Approach. The purpose of this application is to assist Colorado State University to evaluate ecological impacts of invasive non-native mosquito fish on select native fish species under different flow and salinity conditions. Information from this study will inform future efforts to maintain both water supplies and non-consumptive needs. Streams in the South Platte and Republican Basin are home to approximately 30 native fish that are non-consumptive priorities in the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan. Surface water diversions and groundwater pumping have decreased flows in these streams, affecting water quality, resiliency to climate change, and species habitat and composition. This effort will support the South Platte Basin Roundtable to promote restoration, recovery, and sustainability of endangered aquatic, riparian, and wetland species, as outlined in their Basin Implementation Plan. The applicant requests $40,000 from the South Platte Basin account and $94,015 from the statewide account. As this is the sole application from the South Platte Basin, staff recommends approval of the full amount requested.
Thank you, Kat. Are there any questions on this application? Director Yan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering if they should change the name to Sustaining Plains Aquatic Ecosystems Using an Integrated Ecological and Social Distancing Approach, but we'll leave it that way for now. Anyway, so if there are no questions, I would move approval of staff recommendation on agenda item 19K.
Director Yan has moved staff approval on agenda item 19K. It's been seconded by Director Dutton. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If you oppose the motion, please let me know in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. Kat, as you move into the next block, I want to let the board know that my employer, the Nature Conservancy, is providing match on a couple of these projects on 19L, the Dolores River Adaptive Management Project, and the Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project. And go ahead, Kat.
Thank you. The next 4 applications are recommended for approval by the Southwest Basin Roundtable. We do have a few members of the public, I believe, to comment on these, and I will note that again at the end. This is agenda item 19L. The applicant and grantee is Fort Lewis College for the project titled Dolores River Adaptive Management Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Four Corners Water Center at Fort Lewis College to conduct 4 years of monitoring to develop a long-term geomorphic monitoring and analysis protocol for the Dolores River downstream from the McPhee Dam, including an online repository for past and future data collected. The protocol will include a responsive component that can be activated rapidly when hydrologic conditions are favorable. The goal of the project is to help protect and improve wetlands and riparian areas to promote self-sustaining fisheries and functional habitats. This effort will help the Southwest Basin to meet their environmental water needs, a goal in their Basin Implementation Plan. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account and $140,617 from the statewide account. Next slide, please. The next agenda item is 19M. The applicant and grantee is the Morrison Consolidated Ditch Company for the project titled Railroad Siphon Replacement Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Morrison Consolidated Ditch Company to replace an aging and damaged siphon located south of Oxford, Colorado. The grant funds would specifically be used for construction, materials, and labor to replace the siphon, concrete structures, and trash rack. This effort will help the Southwest Basin to achieve its basin goals of improving agricultural water supplies and modernizing critical water infrastructure. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account and $33,875 from the statewide accounts. Next slide, please. This is agenda item 19N. The applicant and grantee is the Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project for the project titled Innovations in Irrigation to Support Heritage Apple Orchards in Southwest Colorado. The purpose of this application is to assist the Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project to create an efficient irrigation system design for a reestablished heritage orchard that was cut in the 1960s and replaced with more water-intensive crops. This project is intended to establish a transferable template to farmers in the region for this type of crop conversion and associated water conservation methods. It will develop an irrigation water management plan and install the first phase of orchard establishment and irrigation improvements on 6.2 acres of orchard hub property. This project supports basin goals to implement efficiency measures to maximize beneficial use and production, and also maintains agricultural viability as called for in Chapter 10 of Colorado's Water Plan. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account and $39,900 from the statewide account. Next slide, please. Agenda item 19O is the final for the Southwest Basin. The applicant and grantee is the Red Mesa Reservoir and Ditch Company for the project titled Red Mesa Reservoir Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Red Mesa Reservoir and Ditch Company to enlarge Red Mesa Reservoir and address its spillway and aging outlet works to comply with the state engineer's dam safety requirements and address a zero storage restriction on Red Mesa Reservoir that would begin on March 1st, 2021 per the state engineer's office. The funds would also enlarge the reservoir to increase the water supply available for reservoir ditches and stakeholders within the La Plata River Basin. Grant money sought in the 2020 CWCB application will be used for final engineering, geotechnical analysis, and environmental permitting to comply with the SEO's submittal deadline for engineering. This effort supports BIP goals such as their agricultural goal to implement efficiency measures to maximize beneficial use and production, and achieve the goal to maintain agricultural viability as called for in Chapter 10 of Colorado's Water Plan. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account and $250,000 from the statewide account. As this is the last application from the Southwest Basin, staff recommends the approval of the full amount requested for agenda items L through O. And I'm also told that Jordan Dimmick, Marty Gebhardt, and Trent Taylor are here to answer questions on agenda item 19O. And I believe Jude Schoenemeyer is here to answer questions on 19N.
Great, thank you, Kat. Are there any questions for Kat? Seeing none, we'll start with 19N. Jude, would you like to address the board? If so, please state your name for the record.
Sure, let me, yeah, hi, thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is Jude Schoenemeyer, co-director of Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project in Southwest Colorado. These funds and this funding will allow us to build out the engineering infrastructure for this new water system, which is going to be a hybrid, and now enabling us to maintain consistent moisture on the trees, especially as they're younger, using the drip system, which will use very little water, with then occasional deep flooding dependent upon what the soil moisture meters tell us we need to have there, how often we need to flood it. We feel like by doing this infrequent flooding, wide-spaced trees with deep-rooted native grasses, drought-resistant native grasses underneath, we'll be able to protect the soil, grow these trees out to a bigger size, The main market for these is going to be juice, and then for these trees themselves, because they're so rare, it's going to be the science to preserve these rare genetics into perpetuity, and to be able to supply this to orchard owners, to nurseries, to other collectors and collections, so that these varieties don't go. This entire property is a classroom. It's all going to be there so that people can go and learn what they need to do to graft, what they need to do to prune, what they need to do to plant very drought-resistant native grasses and pollinators. And it'll be something that they can actually see there, that they can actually put their hands on. Right now, there is no incentive for people to not grow alfalfa because they know how to grow alfalfa. And we never want to see the good alfalfa growers, the good hay growers in our area disrupted by a lack of water. We feel like there's a lot of land that's sort of marginal pasture that could be put back, especially places that were historic orchard ground, that can be put back and rebuild this fruit economy here in Southwest Colorado and a lot of other rural parts of our state, using a lot less water. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jude. Appreciate you making time for us this morning. And next, I'll invite Jordan to address the board. And again, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jordan Dimmick with SGM in Durango, Colorado. Just want to thank a board for consideration of this item. And CWCB has been supporting Red Mesa Reservoir and Ditch Company for a number of years. Over the last couple of years, we've been working on this final feasibility study. And as people may know, Southwest Colorado is fairly arid, and the La Plata River is on the dry side of a relatively dry county. And so this reservoir originally was constructed in the early 1900s, reconstructed in 1945, supports the local economy there, a number of agricultural producers, and has been on the watch list with the dam safety branch as far as future safety for this high hazard dam. So a number of studies have gone on, and we're excited to say we've come up with a solution that we think works for a lot of people. The enlargement will allow some of the senior water rights that they have to be made absolute. And the enlargement predominantly is going to be used to support native fisheries and also help the division engineer meet the compact requirements we have with New Mexico and the La Plata River. And so the proposed alternative will effectively double the reservoir's capacity, and that water will be used in conjunction with Bobby K. Taylor Reservoir downstream for state compact and for fisheries to support those during the winter. And so we're excited, appreciate the support we've had and you guys considering it. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jordan. I don't see any questions. So Marty, would you like to address the board? And if so, please make sure to state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Marty Gebhardt from Red Mesa Reservoir and Ditch Company. I want to thank everybody for their past support, and we hope that you'll give us a good consideration now to keep waters in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Trent, if you would like to address the board, now is your time, and please state your name for the record.
This is Trent Taylor. Nothing extra, just a thank you. We appreciate all your efforts.
Well, to all three of you, this is my basin. This project has been a long time in the works, and I want to commend all of you for the approach that you've taken to this. I know that there were some tough discussions, and I'm really encouraged to see a storage project coming forth for funding that really addressed a lot of issues, and I really view this as a multi-purpose project, and just wanted to thank you all for the time and effort, and also the CWCB staff that worked on this one. Dr. Gigi Richard is also here from Fort Lewis College. Gigi, would you like to address the board? And if so, please state your name for the record.
Hi, thank you. I'm Gigi Richard from the Four Corners Water Center at Fort Lewis College. And I'm representing the Dolores River Adaptive Management Support Project, which is an exciting project. It's a collaborative effort of many organizations and entities. It's Fort Lewis College working with Colorado Mesa University and with Rivers Edge West and several state and federal agencies to hopefully provide some useful data and information about the geomorphology of the Dolores River downstream from McPhee Dam to facilitate decision-making about releases and management of the dam. And the project's been many months in the making and will involve students and Conservation Legacy, Conservation Corps youth teams for monitoring. And then a piece of this project also is to develop an online data repository that will make all of these data useful and easily accessible to anyone who's interested in accessing them. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. And I don't know whether I'm more excited about getting better data for water management or cross-training our young people to do riparian restoration and geomorphology work in my basin. So thank you. And there is a staff recommendation in front of us. Director Yan.
Yeah, I would move staff recommendation on agenda items L through O.
Thank you. And that was Director Yan has moved to approve agenda items 19L through O. It's been seconded by Director Brown. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Any opposition, please note it in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. Let's move on to item 20. And as we do so, I will note that my employer has provided a support letter for this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just get a quick thumbs up that everybody can hear me? Perfect. So for the record, Matt Stearns with the CWCB Finance section, and I'll be presenting on agenda item 20A for the Florida Consolidated Ditch Company. The reason that this is here is because of the fact that it's both a loan project, which we did yesterday, along with the WSRF grant application. And so we thought this was the most appropriate place to put it. The project is the Florida Canal Diversion Replacement in La Plata County, northeast of Durango. The company, as I said, Florida Consolidated Ditch Company is the borrower slash grantee, and they are requesting a WSRF grant from both the Basin and the statewide account in the amount of $275,000 and a loan for $757,500 at 30 years, 1.3%. My contact for this has been Justin Catalano, who's the manager of the company, but I've also been working with Right Water engineers, in particular Pete Foster and Hayes Linhart. Next slide. So the Florida Canal Company, the Florida Mutual Ditch Company, Consolidated Mutual Ditch Company, irrigates an area of about 18,000 acres east and south of Durango, as you can see on the right. Of that, 8,000 acres are irrigated by the diversion structure in question here. You can see it on the upper left-hand side of the screen, and that's the Florida Canal diversion structure. The project is for final design and construction of the selected alternative, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, which provides the benefits of fish passage and aquatic connectivity through this stream segment, as well as removing a low head dam here. So, and that's one of the key parts of this project is rather than just replacing existing infrastructure with what was there before. They're really looking to do a multi-beneficial outcome project by installing this fish passage low head dam removal option, even though it's more expensive. And they have broad support for this project from both CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, as well as the Dam Safety Branch of the State Engineer's Office. But they also have funding from some local partners for the preliminary design of these efforts, and those include the Nature Conservancy, the Southwestern Water Conservation District, the Florida Water Conservancy District, and CWCB. So it really does hit all those boxes for multi-beneficial. And I think I just want to note here that this is where CWCB can still play an important part in these types of projects, and that's by not only offering loans to do the project, but offering grants that can help make that project more multi-beneficial and really a benefit to the community. Next slide, please. So the project cost on this option is $1.2 million. Of that, the request today is for $275,000 from the WSRF grant program, as well as a CWCB loan. And I unfortunately put the wrong number here. With the service fee, the loan would be $757,500 for the terms of 30 years at 1.3%. I also should mention that the company is planning to put in an application for the water plan grant cycle December 1st. And the plan is that that will help offset some of those loan costs for them. With that, the financial ratios currently indicate a week to average borrower, which isn't unique for our program, and collateral will be very similar to other companies like this, which is a pledge of assessment revenues and the project itself, in this case, the diversion structure. With that, I'm available for any questions. Also, we do have Justin Catalano available here, as well as Whitewater engineers, if there are questions that I can't handle. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt? Seeing none, I will invite our guests to speak. Let's start with Justin. If you'd like to address the board, now is the time to do so. Please remember to state your name for the record.
Justin Catalano, Florida Consolidated Ditch Company. Just would like to thank the board for reviewing and considering this project. The Ditch Company feels like it's a good project for many benefits, and we appreciate you considering it. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for making time to join us today. Pete, would you like to address the board? And if so, please remember to state your name for the record.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thanks, Gail, or Director Schwartz, excuse me. Just want to say thank you to the CWCB and thank you for work from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They did a lot of work in coming up with this concept and helping us with the fishery component. So really appreciate their assistance and their time that they put into it, and all of the other stakeholders, and for the canal company to think outside the box and put in a fish-friendly connectivity enhancing project that is also safe. So thank you very much.
Thanks. And Hayes, would you like to address the board? And if so, please remember to state your name for the record.
It's just me today.
Oh, thank you, Pete. Are there any questions from the board for Justin or Pete? Seeing none, Matt, would you like to give us the staff recommendation?
Sure. Next slide. So staff recommendation is approval of a loan grant package as written here and in your board memo.
Director Dutton.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. This looks like a really outstanding project, and I just love when we see both a grant loan combo and then a project that has so many beneficiaries and just really considers all the different water users and the environment in this type of project. So kudos to the project team. And then Matt, thanks for everything. I know that you've probably done a lot of work to help these guys out on getting them to this point. So thank you for that and for your great presentation. And I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 20.
Director Schwartz.
I second the motion.
It's been moved by Director Dutton to approve agenda item 20, seconded by Director Schwartz. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. If there's any opposition, please let me know in the chat. And seeing none, the motion is approved. We are at the end of our agenda for today, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. It's been moved by Director Schwartz, seconded by Director Yan to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there for yet another long Zoom meeting.
And feel better.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hawkins.
Your leadership today.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.